Welcome one and all. It's time for arguably the spiciest tournament report of the year. The Masters, the UK Masters. So in theory, this is the 26 top ranked players in the UK, all amassing in one building for a weekend and battling it out to see who is the true master. And in reality, it's the top 16 ranked players, and then the rest of the numbers are, well, they start off trying to make up those numbers with the top-ranked players from each faction, so whoever's had the best performance within a faction specifically, and then if certain people can't make it, then they go down the list and invite more and more people, and they don't get right down to the chumps at the bottom, though. So everyone there is generally a big hitter in the Kings of War UK community. No one's going there thinking this is going to be easy. You can't really submarine at the Masters because even if you lose all your games in the last round, you could end up against some absolute killer that routinely podiums at events. So really, you just got to try and get points where you can. You're going to be facing really good players all the way through, so it's going to be difficult. Now, I have qualified based on my performance with the Abyssal Dwarfs. I did not get into the top 16. I didn't go to that many big two-day events this season, though, so my score wasn't that high. I did have some good finishes, but highest ranked Abyssal Dwarf player. So there is my Masters list. I don't know whether I can build the most optimal Abyssal Dwarf list with my current model collection, but this is the list that I've been having fun with recently, and I started running it before it was good, I'll have you know. If you go back and look at my reports, there was one tournament where I was taking the double grotesque, double half-breeds before they got buffed in the new book. So I was ahead of the curve on that, and I didn't even know for a fact that they were going to become amazing, but I think they are now. So we've got two big units of those. We've also got some Immortal Guard, who, are they a must-have in a list? I don't know about that, but they're definitely good with their nice upgrade to give them crushing strength for only 15 points, so that is on them. On the half-breeds, I have given them some upgrades, so I've made one of them elite, so it's elite and vicious, which is always good. Oh, by the way, I just seen in the chat we've got some people in there already. We've got Syndra and Christian, so hello there. Let me know if you're watching this live, anybody. This may be the record for the fastest tournament report after a Kings of War event, so if it's not, then I'll have to do better next time, I suppose. So the other unit of half-breeds, the other regiment, they have got the Boots of Striding. So what that does, it gives me lots of sources of striding in this list, because I had a look at the tournament pack and the maps consisted of quite a lot of difficult terrain and forests and obstacles. So if you don't have any Strider or Pathfinder, potentially there can be struggles ahead for you. And I'll talk a bit about that after I've finished summing up the list. So we've got two troops of gargoyles just to chaff people up or maybe dive on objectives if for some reason they happen to still be alive at the end of the game, which is very unlikely, because they need to be a delivery system for my hard-hitting units that maybe can't take as much of a punch as golems would. We've got Dwarven Darkness in the chat as well. Good evening. We've got the Katsuchan rocket launcher, just one, so it's not a big points investment, and it can pick things off at the end of the game, hopefully. Or it can be used to bait the enemy into chasing after it. So if I've got it in the corner, miles away from my army, and the enemy want to send something over there, to kill it when it's only about 85 points, then that's okay with me as well. Then, the expensive, controversial choices. We have got the Grotesque Champion with Blade of Slashing, so that's 220 points, and it's only one lower nerve than a horde of Grotesques. It's obviously got a lot less attacks, but it does hit on 3s, and it's got additional crushing instead of being so reliant on Thunderous. It has all the other cool special rules that they have. Then we've got the Spellcaster Big Flyer, which is the Ironcaster on the Great Winged Half-Breed. So, with the Half-Breed affinity, so when it's within range, within 6 of the Half-Breeds or the Grotesques, it gets +1 to its casting to a maximum of +3. I've given it the Diadem as well, so it's up to Fireball 18, potentially Fireball 21. And then as soon as it's used its Fireball, it can then immediately use the healing spell as well. It starts off with heal 4, so it can potentially go up to heal 7. So potentially, if I've got it surrounded by my units, Fireball 21, and then Heal 7 being cast back to back with no line of sight restriction on the heal. So that's the thinking behind that being in there for multi-purpose spell casting, and then if someone opens up a flank, it can always charge a flank as well since it's a big flyer. So I've got lots of Strider in this list. I've got all three of these grotesque champion units have Strider. I've got the Boots of Striding on one of my half-breed regiments. Also, the big flyer and Susan, who is there with Bracky as well. I don't think I can actually mention them yet. So Susan and the Gargoyles. So there's 4 flying units. So I've got lots of units. Over half my army can start in difficult terrain and charge out of it and not be hindered, which I think is a big advantage in this tournament, looking at the maps beforehand. The only units that will be hindered of going out of terrain are going to be my elite half-breeds, the Immortal Guard, and Bracky. And going into terrain, of course, the flyers don't want to be doing that ideally. But, so all the flyers flying out of terrain, good. These 4 units here, all with Strider, just one use for this unit. But going in or out of terrain, they're all fine as well. I looked at the missions beforehand, and there are some that require possibly quite a lot of unit strength, and I do not have that. But I'm okay with that because I think this list is quite killy. So rather than trying to hold an area with a lot of unit strength, I'm just going to try to murder the enemy anyway. So that's the plan there. And another thing that I've taken into this tournament is looking back at all my past performances. Occasionally, I do kind of just launch into fights when it's not entirely necessary. So maybe if I've got nothing to play for in the last game, I might do that. But what I'm thinking is taking a bit more of a chess-like approach to this tournament. And instead of making moves necessarily, you don't always want to attack when it's available. You want to set something up that's going to make your attack even more devastating next time and to protect your pieces, as it were. So if you've got something out in the open and it's going to charge in, it's going to be left exposed, that's no good to you. But if it's going to be left exposed and you've got another unit covering that, so the enemy unit that comes in would then get killed by you, then just things to think about. I'm going to look at more positioning and try and set things up more rather than trying to engage in fights. Even though my list is fast, I think the fact that there's so much difficult terrain and woods to hide in with my Strider units means that I can be quite patient and have some cover if I'm against shooting lists, but we'll see what I'm up against. So Susan, Bracky, expensive individuals that obviously can't score, but they do a good job. Bracky has very, very juicy special rules, and Susan is just really fast. So 4 lots of inspiring, and there is a picture of my list if anyone wanted to have a look at that as well. So a lot of points spent on characters who are expensive. Cheap rocket launcher, the 4 main fighting units there, Immortal Guard, who have a good unit strength for their cost and for the unit footprint, so they're quite handy for that. And Chaff Gargoyles. Who have I got in round 1? Well, I can tell you, actually, I will open up the tournament pack here so I can get the names of all the scenarios right as well. So, just scrolling on down the tournament pack here, and the first scenario is a token scenario, so they all have a kind of different theme, all the missions, so you're not going to have, for example, dominate and control, because they're both like area control scenarios, so you wouldn't have both of those. So the first scenario is plunder, which is where you have 5 tokens along the centre line, and then you pick 1 each that are going to be worth 2 at the end of the game, and all the others are just worth 1 to you, and you can pick them up. So they're tokens rather than objectives. And the list I'm up against here is Goblins. Oh yeah, 2,345 points. Don't know if I mentioned that. Very unusual point level for a tournament for Kings of War. I don't think I've ever seen it before, and maybe I'll never see it again. But there you go, 2,345. So what have we got here? We've got some Goblin Rabble, a couple of regiments there. We have got some Fleabag Riders, 2 of those, and they've got more pups, which are extra attacks at the start. I think it has to be the first time they attack. And then if you've got a morph-up launcher, you can reload them. But there are no morph-up launchers in this list, so no reloads. It's just an initial extra burst of attacks when they go in. Mincers, there is a troop with skirmishers' boots, which gives them nimble, which is a very interesting idea because the chariot troop is a square base. So as you'll know if you've played Kings of War, a nimble square-based unit can get round quite well, and it's difficult to block it in. Then there are 2 regiments of mincers as well, so they're the more traditional size, and they are not nimble. There are 2 giants, one really big giant and one very small giant, which we'll get to in a moment. There's a king with the Trickster's Wand and the Hex spell. So as soon as I see Hex, I think, oh no, I've got my gigantic height 6, big flying wizard, and I'm not going to be able to hide it really, and it's going to get hexed, and I'm not going to be throwing 21 fireballs and 7 healing with Hex, because he's going to take 2 damage for every single one, so every single hit. So it's the worst possible thing to get hexed. So as soon as I see Hex, I think, okay, I'm probably not going to be casting too many spells in this game. Especially considering that all my spells are short range, so I have to get close to the enemy, so I'm not going to be able to hide from a distance, maybe out of range of Hex. Not going to be an option. Then there is a whiz on a Fleabag as well, who has Lightning Bolt, Bane Chant, and Inspiring Talisman, which is a standard whiz setup there, inspiring. Then there's Magua, who is actually quite a good counter to my individuals, because he's got Duelist, so if you can position him well, that can be quite juicy. Let's have a look in the chat a second here. Apparently I'm the best Kings of War battle report on the whole of YouTube. Well, I'm not going to argue against that. Let's see, Syndra says, one thing I noticed is Kings of War can easily be very boring to watch. This is the best format for Kings of War battle reports. You can't watch live reports. I suppose Kings of War, just watching from above. I suppose if you've got entertaining commentators, so maybe if you were watching the Masters live streams, I assume they were entertaining. I haven't watched any of them because I was playing at the time. But yeah, I think it is more reliant on the commentators in those situations. Okay, Christian says, this format is a lot of fun and gives plenty of time to describe thoughts and tactics compared to live. Yes, that's the whole idea of doing these things. Not only does it educate the world on little tricks that I might know that other people might not, and also that my opponents use on me that I'm then relaying to you, but it's also helpful to me to go over all my games as well, so I can learn from my mistakes, although I am also telling everyone how to beat me, so it's a wonder that I ever win any games on that basis. So Magua, did I say? Yeah, there's Magua. So Lightning Bolt 4, Duelist, handy against my individuals, lots of special rules, so a pretty good choice against me, I would say. And then there are more Fleabags, and these ones have explosives when they charge in, so they can do extra damage if they roll 6s. I think 6s to hit turn into 2 hits, I think, is that right? And then they also damage themselves with that. So it's the 2 regiments, and they've also got a king with that rule as well, and he's also got Bane Chant. So 2 sources of Bane Chant in here. So obviously there are 4 Fleabag regiments, and they're quite dangerous because they're speed 10, so they're faster than almost my whole army. And then the mincers hit quite hard. Outside of that, is there anything to be worried about? Giants, of course, because they're the giants with Slayer D6. So against most of my army, in fact, that's going to be quite handy. So I've got lots of big stuff out there. So, here's the setup. We have 1 point objectives there, 2 point objective in the middle, 1 point objective there, and 1 point objective on the left. And before I talk about my strategy to try and score and win in this game, I suppose I should tell you about the tournament scoring system. So, winning is the most important thing. Nothing else can give you tournament points, only winning. So whoever wins the most games is going to win the tournament, regardless of how close their wins were, which I like. And then after that, it then goes to tournament points for tiebreakers. So if lots of people end on 4 wins, for instance, then the person who got the most tournament points during the event would then win. And after tournament points, if that's a tie, it then goes to kills. So it's all about winning. And if you can win big, obviously, that's going to help you in tiebreaker situations. But killing is considerably less important in this one. So, you want to try and win big, but winning is obviously most vital. So you don't necessarily need to win big, just win. So, with all the valuable objectives here, anyone that holds these two is going to win, because they're worth 2 each. The others are only worth 1 each, so that would be 3 in total. So I've put my entire army on this side, and another purpose of that is to stop myself being flanked. There is nothing getting in this flank, and Susan has been deployed all the way on this flank on her own as a flank deterrent, because she is a good counter to fleabags. If they want to charge me, they're going to have to come into range, at which point Susan will then say, thank you very much, I will charge you instead. And she's certainly got a good chance of taking out a unit of fleabags. So anything that relies on Thunderous Charge, she wants to shut that down. I've put Grotesques facing out that way as well, so they can head in that direction. My Immortal Guard are all the way out on the left flank, which you might think is weird because they're so slow, so they're not going to affect the rest of the game. But I just wanted a nice solid unit that's going to pick up this valuable token, potentially. And yeah, that's their goal. So if they can pick that up, if the fight's going well, they can start working their way across, and they're one of the few units on the table that won't be slowed down by carrying tokens either. So that's the thinking there. I've got my big caster between all the units that are going to be buffing up its spell casting, with gargoyles hiding at the back, Grotesque Champion out here with the Grotesques, and the rocket launcher is looking across the battlefield. So let me just show you that wide shot again. Rocket launcher is down here. So this is just difficult terrain, so it's got a good shot of all this area where most of the enemy army is, and good targets for it include fleabags, who I can see over the top of my Immortal Guard, which is why they're positioned in front of it. So I'm going to be lobbing rockets onto the fleabags and see if that can take them out. Fleabags are certainly a potentially juicy target for them. And there is the massive giant, there's the tiny giant. We've got the small nimble mincers there, we've got the other mincers there and there, got some rabble, and we've got fleabags, 2 units out there with the king who all explodes. I think there's 1 exploding fleabag unit and 1 non-exploding on each flank, and then the king explodes out there. The Wiz is in there somewhere with Bane Chant. I think that guy, who's that one? Who's that little individual there? Let's have a look at the list. Who is that? That could be the king there. Yep, so that'll be the king. And let's go down the enemy army and have a look at them. So this really tall giant has obviously been heavily modified, and I was complimenting the neck beard that's been added on there, and then I was told that it was based on a werewolf action figure, which then had mantic giant parts attached to it, so very nice. Then there's the very small giant, which I think is it's the rat demon creature, I think. It certainly looks like the legs, and then it's had the wings taken off, and mantic giant parts used there as well, so very nice. And there we go, they're the Moor Pups, which are going to be unleashed when they get into combat. And look at that cinematic view. Turn 1 for me. Now, because of the terrain setups, I'm quite often wanting to go first here, because what I want to do is to immediately fly Susan up into a position where she can't be seen, but anyone who advances, she can see them. That's the goal with her. And then often I'll have difficult terrain or woods that I can walk into with my Strider units. So even if I'm within charge range of some of the enemy units, they probably won't want to charge me in the difficult terrain. So I mostly like to go first with this list. Although, again, it depends on the mission, depends on the scenario and the opposing army. But here I think going first will serve me well. I won't be able to advance that far because all the fleabags are speed 10. So I don't want to get right up there and allow them to multi-charge any of my units, for instance. Because even if they're behind each other, they would still be able to see grotesques over the top of each other. So I have advanced, put gargoyles out there. I think the gargoyles are in charge range of those fleabags, but I've really just put everyone up into difficult terrain. I've got these guys on a hill, Bracky is on a hill, and he is out of charge range of everybody. So I think the only charge is fleabags into gargoyles, There's the first turn option over there. And what does the rocket launcher do? Look at that. 6 wounds immediately onto those flea bags. I don't waver them, but that's a really good start, so they don't have too many ways of getting back. Bring and Battle says, this is the best channel to watch. Good Kings of War tactical insight. Yes, it certainly is. So, there is my battle line. I've kept out of charge range, or out of sight in the case of Susan. She's just outside the woods. And I'm in a position to threaten anyone that wants to get onto these objectives. If they want to charge the gargoyles, okay. If they don't charge the gargoyles, and they're unable to shoot them off, because they are in difficult terrain, so they will get cover in there. If they don't manage to get rid of them, I will just be able to charge something and cover my advance. And the other gargoyles are waiting back here because obviously I don't want to lose both of them to maybe a bit of lucky shooting. So I want to have 1 unit spare because I am going to need to block the enemy up because they do have a lot of speed. And I'm not going to be able to dictate all the fighting because there's too many of them. And however, these big defense 6, big shield mincer units. This one's on the front line, this one's on the front line, this one is behind Rabble. I obviously want to get into their flanks, but I don't know how easy that's going to be here. If anyone's going to do it, it could potentially be Susan or Bracky. But they do have to worry about Magua, who is lurking down here. So, could be a job for Bracky if he can burst through and get between the enemy lines so that they can't charge him, and then he can start looking for flanks on mincers. I don't do any spellcasting in this turn because they're out of fireball range. On to turn 1 for my opponent. Jazz Naz, so don't forget to like the video. Yes, if anyone hasn't liked this video, you're some kind of heathen. And turn 1 for the enemy. So what's going on here? Well, they're ignoring Susan, and the unit in front has got this unit perfectly aligned behind it so that Susan cannot charge this unit here, because there's nowhere for her to land in the rear of the unit. And this is the explosive unit as well. However, I'm not too concerned by that, because there is a wall here, which would hinder them if they were charging over it. So Susan can see both of them. So as long as she can go for one of these units, that's fine by me. So she's going to just hit the back unit next turn, most likely. Because those cavalry are the big threat, because they do have such a long threat range. Rabble have moved up. The giant is not too eager. I don't think the giant or this mincer, this nimble mincer unit, they don't want to get charged by the half-breeds on the hill. That would be really bad, because even if you defend 6 in the front, they'd be charging off with Crush 1, Thunderous 2. And this is the elite and vicious unit, so you wouldn't like to take that charge, even as defense 6, and a giant wouldn't like to take that charge either. Bracky would also be around. So backing off there, which is probably wise rather than taking those charges, because you have got the speed advantage. So 1 unit of Fleabags decide they're going to go straight into the gargoyles. And I don't think they use the morp up, so I don't think you have to use it, so they're saving it. And they're going to hope to kill the gargoyles, and then I will very likely kill them. But we've got started fighting. This unit, though, have gone over there. Rather than joining in and coming forwards, they've gone behind. So I think these ones charged in because they took damage from shooting, so they didn't want to just stay back and take another shot. This unit got out the way because they would also be a prime target for shooting. The stuff that I can shoot at now is much higher defense, so defense 6 here, defense 5 on the giant. That would be much more difficult to do damage, and higher nerve, especially on the giant as well. My big caster is hexed, as anticipated, so I'm not going to be doing any spells next turn. So I'm mostly going to be using this guy for combat now, because he's just going to keep getting hexed unless I can kill or just punch the caster in the face that's putting it on him. You can see that the arc of these grotesques is being checked, and the gargoyles are dead, and they back up a little bit afterwards. So yeah, that's where they end up. They go backwards, and over here there are a few options I've got here. Bracky could charge either of the Rabble units, I think, but that's about it if he really wants to charge Rabble. Susan can charge this unit of Fleabags, which she is certainly going to do, because even though Magwar's there and he is a danger to her, I think shutting down the cavalry is still a good option. And I think I may be right in thinking Magwar is actually the same height as them, So unless this unit then runs away and doesn't countercharge Susan, Magua wouldn't be able to see her anyway. So it wouldn't be as a combo. But I'm hoping to just kill them in one round with Susan. It's definitely possible. And what else am I going to do here? I'm going to hit this unit with something. I've got Immortal Guard, I've got the Grotesque Champion. I may have to fly the Gargoyles out this turn if I want to advance, because I need to block in probably the Giant and these Mincers. This Giant and these Mincers are hanging back though, so I don't have to worry about them yet, which is nice. And then there are of course these Fleetbags, but there's so much difficult terrain here, and the enemy does not have a lot of Strider, only really the Giants, I think. So I'm quite happy about that, because I've got lots of Strider. Turn 2. So Susan does kill the Fleabags with that charge in the rear, and then she overruns behind this one. So she's going to get attacked by Magua next turn, who does have Duelist. But she's shut down one cavalry unit, and there's no guarantee that that will kill her. There's a good chance she'll be wavered as a result of that combat, actually. It's the most likely outcome, I think. And the Immortal Guard take on the Fleabags there, who were already on 6 wounds, so they're dead. I think I may have put in the Grotesque Champion as well, who then fell back, possibly. Maybe not. And over here, I'm just repositioning a bit, because... let me just show you the wide shot. So this unit moved this way a bit, which means that their threat projection now comes all the way down here. So Bracky gets out the way and just jumps down there, which is here. So again, I'm being patient here though. I'm not throwing everything into combat. I'm only making precision strikes. And the Immortal Guard have got everyone in the front, so if something wants to hit them, that's fine. The Grotesque Champion is protected. And these Fleabags may have some charge options, but these Mincers will have to go first. And the hard-hitting stuff isn't going to get to me yet back here, these 3 units that are quite dangerous. So just making precision strikes, killing off 2 cavalry units already, 2 of the units that I identified as being big threats, so I'm quite happy with that. Making sure I'm not in the charge range of that cavalry there, and opening up my angle so I can start attacking this side with this little group here. The half-breeds, the grotesques, and Bracky can all potentially go off and deal with this part of the table here, and then this army facing off against this bunch here. So I'm waiting to see what these 2 units do, whether they continue to hang back or whether they advance. I think I've set up the half-breeds so that they can't advance and get out of my arc though. So I think if they come forward, they are leaving themselves open to a charge. So, turn 2 for the Goblins. And they run away from Susan, these Fleabags that she was behind, and then Magua attacks her. And these Mincers, these are the nimble ones, so they are hanging out behind this rabble so it can't be charged. Which is probably a good idea. And if I want to throw everything at the rabble, I'm sure my opponent is absolutely fine with that, because look at these units waiting behind. And there is some testing of pivoting going on there with a blank base, which is a very handy thing to have in Kings of War. And you can see that the Giant is not too brave at the moment, but his friendly Mincer unit has gone over there. So it looks like they are committing more to this side now, fearing that perhaps Susan taking out the first unit of cavalry has tipped that in my favour, and they're becoming quite compact in the middle. And that's kind of what I like to see, because I can then use this 1 unit of gargoyles to potentially chaff up multiple units then if they're packed together tightly. And they're all in difficult terrain as well, which obviously the Giant doesn't care about, but some units definitely do. And most of my units here don't care about being in the terrain. This is my Strider unit of half-breeds there. The one on the hill is the elite unit. So, Magua gets Bane Chanted as well, so yeah. Often I forget to account for Bane Chant when I'm thinking about whether the enemy is likely to kill me. 10 wounds to Susan, but doesn't even waver her. So yeah, very bad nerve roll there. So, yeah, that's a lot of damage done. So I would expect her to get wavered when being attacked by Magua with Duelist. That's the most likely outcome, I think. But she doesn't even get wavered. Yeah, it looks like a 3 there in the rolling tub. So not enough. So Susan is going to be free to charge the next unit of Fleabags next turn, which is her job. Shut down the cavalry. And that's a bonus for me because it's going to make it easier to deal with this side now. Over here, the mincers there have angled themselves in a bit, which means I can't multi-charge the giant. And I can't really charge too many units into them, possibly either. But it does mean as well that they now can't see anything that's in this area. So I've got a nice free space here that's only under threat from that giant. And onto my turn 3. Thought something funny was going on there, but yes, it is turn 3. So Susan goes in, does 4 wounds, but she's taken away their Thunderous Charge, which is the main thing they have going for them, and that's her main goal. And she's regenerated some wounds as well. The Grotesques kill the front unit, and let's go back here. So my big flyer, you'll notice, was landing there. That's because I decide that because I'm repeatedly hexed, I'm just going to fly in and hit the flank of those mincers, which I was just able to get to with 20 inches, and it was in arc. So it's one of those things when there's a really fast flyer behind enemy lines, it's tempting to not check the arc because it doesn't feel like a threat because it's really far away and it's behind other units. I'm definitely guilty of this sometimes, not checking on units that are behind the enemy. So the Overmaster, oh not the Overmaster, the Ironcaster, so he's only got 8 attacks but 16 in the flank obviously with lots of crushing, kills that Nimble Mincer unit. And these Fleabags have had their Thunderous Charge taken away, so yeah, this area is looking very tasty at the moment. And then turns around to face that giant, who is obviously still a threat, but I can be flank charged. It was still worth making that move because I was just going to get hexed for the rest of the game, so I might as well kill something and stop it hitting my other units. Now, we haven't really been picking up a lot of tokens yet, you may have noticed, considering they are just out there for the taking. And the Grotesques on this unit of Rabble don't do that much damage, actually. It was a terrible roll and then a double 1. But it's not a true double 1 because they're not anywhere near the murder threshold yet. I put the Immortal Guard and the Grotesque Champion into these mincers in the front, you may notice, which is obviously defense 6, but do 6 damage, just taking away, I think it has a bit of Thunderous Charge, which has now been taken away. And the Gargoyles have landed to prevent the giant from getting through into my important units. Now, I don't know if it was entirely necessary to send both of these units in here, because I am kind of allowing the giant a flank charge on the Grotesque Champion now. I think it can see him. So potentially, what also could have been an option here is putting the Grotesque Champion more like here, not charging, just moving to about there. And that way the Immortal Guard would stay at this end of the mincers and then not be charged by the giant, because they don't slide down far enough, maybe, to be seen. But that does mean that they could potentially then be flanked by the mincers. So it's a tough situation, but I wanted to just throw things into combat. I decided, let's go back and have a look. I decided that this situation is where I'm going to fling everything in. So I think putting those 2 in there is maybe a little bit too aggressive, but I felt like this was the turn that I'm just going to fling everything into combat. I've set it up nicely. I'm just going to start trading units because I've got the advantage. I've taken out quite a few already. So let's go. So I've also picked up the 2-point objective with the Immortal Guard, who can be countercharged, obviously, and there are some nimble Fleabags there that could also join in. But as I was saying earlier about protecting your pieces if they are taken, I've also got the half-breeds lined up to steam in there and take out anyone that kills them. So this side is just looking much better though. And on to turn 3 for the Goblins. So the giant chooses to bypass my big flyer because it is actually in range of the Grotesques, so decides to just ignore it and charging straight towards it and then nope, I'm going to go round you, buddy. And the Fleabags also come down off the wall into this charge as well, so they can use their Moorpups, which will do a bit of damage. So they're not as hindered, despite the fact that they came off this wall. The Moorpups will do some damage. But I've got them inspired and they're undamaged so far, so I'm quite confident they will survive. The Mincers go into the Immortal Guard. The giant flank charges the grotesque champion, which I think is going to be goodbye to that thing. And Bane Chant is cast, I think, onto the Fleabags here, which is another thing I always forget. I always forget that people have Bane Chant. And then Hex is put onto my caster again. Susan is killed by Magwar at the second attempt, so she's kind of done her job. She killed a unit of Fleabags and then stopped another one having any thunderous charge this turn. My Grotesques get wavered in the combat there, which is great because they have Fury, so they can just countercharge one of these units now. And the Grotesque Champion is killed though. And the Immortal Guard are killed as well. So, yeah, that side has lost a couple of key units, but these mincers are damaged on 6, so I've got a decent chance of taking them out with the half-breeds, even though they are defense 6 in the front. I haven't used my Boots of Striding yet, so I'll still be hitting them on 3s. And the Gargoyles are still here though, nothing attacked them, so they're still chaffing up. And I'm still feeling fairly good about it, although they have stolen the 2-point objective off me now, it should be noted. So, turn 4 for me, what am I going to do here? Well, the Grotesques are obviously going to charge that unit again. The Gargoyles should probably charge something to be an extra nuisance. They could maybe charge the Giant, or they could fly over the enemy and not block anyone up, which doesn't sound like a good idea. These half-breeds can go into the Giant. The Grotesques can either countercharge the Fleabags or the Giant there. A Bracky could join in one of these fights, potentially. I've got my big flyer who can hit the character down there or just turn round, or what I'm actually going to do with it, I think, you'll see in a moment, is, well, we'll get to that. So, the Grotesques kill the unit that was here, which was the Fleabags, and Bracky and the half-breeds kill the Giant, and then they turn that away, and they've picked up the middle 2-point objective. The Grotesques are right next to this 1-point objective, which they're going to hopefully shuffle over to collect in a minute. And 2-point objective there. So I move my Hexed Wizard off the hill down here and just look into the rear of the more dangerous side of the enemy army. Because even now, while Hexed, this is still a very dangerous unit for the enemy. Just staring at them. They can't afford to turn their backs on this thing. It's got 8 attacks, so in the rear that would be very dangerous. And the rabble here are killed. I was tempted to not even attack this rabble unit with my Grotesques, because all I'm doing is allowing these mincers to get past. So let me show you, let me go back. So, here. However, I kind of wanted to get rid of them now, because with this guy positioning himself there, I think this tide is turning in my favour. So I don't feel like allowing them through is going to be as big of an issue, because there is a wall there as well. So I just want to start killing things now. I'm definitely feeling confident, because otherwise I would just not fight them and disengage. And then, hold on, let me see. Could they have double charged me if I did that? I don't think so, because they would only slide down far enough for them to fit into the combat. So I don't know if they would be able to make it past the Gargoyles. So I don't think they could have double charged me. So I think that it would have locked them out the game for a turn. But obviously feeling confident, so I'm going to allow it. So these guys kill the mincers there as well, that were already on damage and had already taken the 2-point objective. So I've got 2 points there, 2 points there. It's a 1-pointer there and a 1-pointer there. So it's looking healthy, but the enemy have still got, who have they got that can hold objectives? Mincers, Giant, I think that's it, because this is all dead over here. So it's looking very healthy at this stage. And the Gargoyles did charge the Giant, so they're chaffing things up nicely. Turn 4 for the enemy. So, we've got some Fleabags. Now, where were they hiding? Where were those Fleabags? They must be behind the Giant. I can't... Oh yeah, there's the base there. So yeah, Fleabags there, who are hiding, but killed the mincers. So they steam in to the half-breeds along with the Wizard. I don't know if he actually charges in the Wizard or whether he's just sitting there. And then the mincers go into the Grotesques there, and the Giant is obviously going to try and finish off the Gargoyles. Jazz says, I haven't played Kings of War since 2nd edition with my elves, trying to make the most of bolt throwers and elite. Elves are still tasty, I can tell you. So it's worth giving it a go. And Magua decides to go after the half-breeds there, along with this king. They are inspired and they're undamaged, so I'm fairly sure they'll survive that, for a round at least. They do take some wounds. And the half-breeds here get killed, and the token is stolen by the fleabags, who have 2 wounds on them. And the grotesques taking some wounds, the gargoyles die. So, the enemy now have 3 units over here. I'm holding a 2-point objective there. The grotesques are easily going to get this 1-pointer. There's 1-pointer there, the grotesques can just pick up as soon as I countercharge there. So, what am I going to do? My flyer, because the giant moved backwards, I could flank charge the giant, which would be hindered. I could flank charge this unit, which would be... I don't know if it would be hindered actually, because this guy's here. So we'll find out whether it's hindered in a moment, but I think I can land there and not be hindered, and kill this unit with a flank charge, and then steal the token off them, turn round, and then face a charge in the front from the giant. So that's the plan. Turn 5 for me. So, the grotesques, they kill Magua, and then they turn round and look at the token that they're going to try and walk towards next time. The reason you want to be looking directly at the token is that so if, for example, an enemy were to sit in front of them, then they could fight it and charge through it, and if they attack any other facing, you don't have to worry about them blocking you. And this king went into the flank of the half-breeds trying to chip away at them. You've not heard anything about my rocket launcher lately, that's because it's not really done any damage since the first turn, I think. It may have done 1 or 2 points of damage to a giant, but not enough to warrant taking an exciting photo of it. The grotesques do that charge, that counter charge, and then pick up the token in the process. And I managed to kill the fleabags with a flank charge from my flyer, and then the rocket launcher puts 1 wound on the giant and wavers it with a 6/6. Wow, wow, wow. So the giant can now not charge into my flyer. It's now stuck there because it's so put off because it took a rocket to the knee. Yeah, rocket launcher paying for itself already. And flyer, getting some good use out of my big flyer, despite the fact that he was... And on to turn 5 for the goblins. So, a counter charge here, this fight rumbles on, and we've also got the king in the flank of the grotesques as well, and the wizard bane chanting the mincers. And as a result of that, they kill the unit, so the token is dropped. And over here, I don't think they pick it up. So they just turn around to face that way. And the giant, I think, can't really do much because he's wavered. So, what am I going to do on my turn 6? Okay, I've got a 2-point objective here. My grotesques can just walk onto the 1-point objective. So I'm in a winning position. I need to get this guy out of charge arc of the giant, which I can, because I can just go sideways. And I should be safe then, because he's holding a 2-point objective. The only way I would mess it up is if I charge into these mincers with my half-breeds, and then don't kill them, and then I get killed and lose my 2-point objective token. Loot token, should I say. Plunder token, if you will. So, I'm not going to be too aggressive here. Turn 6. Grotesques onto the 1-point token. I just back up with the 2-point token, and Bracky puts himself on the hill so he can charge out to hit anyone that's coming towards me in turn 6. The rocket fires and kills the mincers. So, how much damage were they on? I don't think they were that wounded. There may be a dice there, but it does a little bit of damage to them, and then just kills them with those nerve rolls. Isn't that lovely? So don't have to worry about that. I get out of charge arc of this giant. Because even though I think I'm within an inch, I was already within an inch, and my move didn't bring me closer to it, which, as far as I'm aware, is the criteria for making the move. So it now can't charge me, and unless I get hit by something else, I'm safe. So it's a pretty safe game, because the enemy can't really take the tokens. So in turn 6, what do? Back up the giant, charge the king in there, trying to do some damage. Bane chant him up, but don't do much at all. And then we do have a turn 7 though. And look, I'm down to the last minute on the clock now as well. And because there's a turn 7, I may well end up losing this guy to the giant. So I'm going to try and kill this king and then turn around to look at the giant, but I don't think that's happening. And then turn 7, my opponent sends the giant in, but doesn't kill this guy at all though. Nope. So he does do some damage that's not shown here, but that was the end of the game. So I'm holding lots of objectives. I'm holding a 2-pointer, a 2-pointer, and a 1-pointer, I think. So yeah, I didn't have many scoring units. There's an objective on the ground left there, and there's the one on the far right that's been left on the ground as well. So 5 points. So starting off the Masters with a win. That's already as many wins as I got at the last Masters. Although, in my defence, I did take an army list that was mainly built to try and win the best army award, which it did. So, already got my result from last Masters. Only it can get better from here. So, during lunch on day 1, I took pictures of the various armies. So there's mine. Very nice, obviously. There's the army I just faced, the Goblins, with the very big and very small giants. Here we've got some Northern Alliance, very scary looking list, and I have faced this army before. We've got some Rat, Scum, some Ratkin. We have got some Halflings, and these are very nice. These are the trolls that normally come pushing these things, but they've been converted with hairier heads, and they've been given lots of fur, so they're like yetis. So, out of everything that was there on the weekend of the event, I think these might have been my favourite units to look at, potentially. Nice halflings. Then we've got some filthy looking Basileans, very fast and flying. Pure filth. We have got some, I'm going to assume, forces of nature right there, because it's so woodlandy, with some owl bears. Very nice. I also enjoyed looking at those. Then we've got rift forged orcs, which you don't see a huge amount of, but they are a cool army, especially with that lightning going on. Definitely forged in the rift. And then there were some more Abyssal Dwarfs, which I took a picture of, despite the fact they weren't laid out for such. They were just on these lids. But you can see how this list is different to mine. So there are no grotesques, there are more gargoyles, and there are 3 half-breed champions, Bracky, and an orc character as well, who does a similar job, along with the orc cavalry formation. So, very different list. There's an Ironcaster somewhere as well. Then we've got some... These are Goblins, I think. Yep. So, war trombones, nice to see them. The Goblin meta has definitely moved on since my days of running lots of trolls and war trombones. We've got some more filthy Basileans. We've got some Abyssals. We've got... Is this... Yes, some Salamanders there. Not laid out for display, but I take a photo anyway, because that's just kind of the guy I am. We've got Twilightkin, or Twigletkin, as I like to call them. There's another Twigletkin army somewhere. Yep, here it is. So, more Twiglets. And this one actually won the Best Army Award at this event. These Twiglets, so very nice. Then we've got Kingdoms of Men with a very characterful giant. And there are some dwarves that weren't laid out for display, so I just took a picture of this particular unit, which is very cool. But there's the rest of the army. Some Empire of Dust. Again, very, very cool looking army. And on to the next round. So, the next scenario is Smoke and Mirrors, which is quite a complicated one. You don't really want it on the last round of an event because people's brains will melt. And I'm up against the Northern Alliance, and anyone familiar with the Kings of War community will see the name Tom and think, oh no, It's him, the guy that always wins the tournaments. Surely I can't beat him. Well, I did get a draw against him once, but that's the best I've ever done. So, what's in the list, and what is scary about it as far as I'm concerned? Ice Naiads. So, they have Ensnare and Phalanx. That is the one unit that is the most terrifying to my army, because most of my army is cavalry, heavy cavalry, or flying. So I'm not going to be able to do much to that unit. They regenerate as well. And they have Hammer of Measured Force. They're not a pushover in combat either when it comes to striking back. So that is a very scary unit. 4 regiments of Pack Hunters. Now these are the kind of thing that Susan probably wouldn't mind shutting down because they're a shooting unit, but they also have Thunderous Charge. So he would be a good one for dealing with a unit like that. Ice Elementals. There's no one to surge them, but they do have a breath attack, basically. And they also dish out Frozen to the enemy, which can slow them down. And certain other units become vicious when attacking frozen units. Frostclaw Riders, there is a large horde of those with Boots of Striding, so potential Strider on them. Snow Foxes, small chaff unit. 3 Snow Troll Primes, which are just a kind of like a Troll Bruiser or a Grotesque Champion, except the Grotesque Champion's obviously moved into a new profile now because it's just been buffed up so much and got a points increase, but it's in that kind of bracket like an Ogre hero of just a nimble, square-based character that's fairly fast, not too fast, and can get around, chip in with damage, essentially be a roadblock. Then 2 Lords on Chimeras, one with Blade of Slashing, one with Pipes of Terror, so they have Icy Breath and they're just pretty good at fighting as well. So, Smoke and Mirrors. This is where you put down tokens on the opposing half. Actually, they're objectives, not tokens. So you put down objectives on the enemy half of the table, and then at the end of the game, if you're standing and controlling them, then you get as many points as is underneath. So they get flipped over 1 each at the end of each turn. So you slowly learn where the objectives are and where the valuable ones are. So you have a 2-pointer, 2 1s, and 2 0s to place. So if anyone can actually remember where they've placed all their tokens, or all their objectives, then it's impressive. But I believe that I've got mine, the ones that are actually worth anything, here, here, and here. And the ones that are worth nothing are kind of over here somewhere. I think that's right, but you can bluff it as well. You can put a valuable 1 miles away from where you've put your army, with a plan to go and get it, hopefully. And what is my game plan going into this one? Because obviously you don't know 50% of what you're fighting over until halfway through the game. So you can't be too focused on the objectives immediately. So what I've gone for, there's a big statue here and a big rock there. So there's kind of a natural funnel into this area. And there are a lot of objectives around this point, potentially. I know these 2 are worth something. So hopefully these ones are as well. And I want to do the majority of the fighting in this area, because I'm not going to get flanked then. There are some big flying units that are very scary. So I've built this kind of anti-flyer brick. And what I'm going to do is advance up in kind of a staggered way, so that the Grotesque Horde can never be multi-charged. Because they can stand up to any one of those units in the front, but not multi. And the half-breeds behind and my caster behind can't be charged. That's my goal with the setup there. The Grotesque Champion, maybe I'll let that get charged, because it's certainly not going to be triple charged because it's so small a base. So maybe I'll let in a double on that. The Immortal Guard, I'm going to be less bothered about them. And I've got some faster units here on this side. And these are the Boots of Strider half-breeds, which is why I've got them around this area with the wall and the woods and the difficult terrain there. This area between the 2 pieces of impassable terrain is actually quite interesting because it's not big enough for cavalry to fit through. So only smaller things like individuals or Snow Troll Primes maybe could fit through there. So not a lot. So I know that the objectives over there that I've placed are worthless. So I've not got much over there at all. I'm really just using to flank me from down here, because they're going to be limited in how fast they can get to me if they have to deal with this stuff. And then this solid block can hopefully outlast that icy badness over there. That's the plan. Let's see how it goes. So I got my rocket launcher down there as well, and who can it see? Well, it's got quite a good view because that's just difficult terrain, so it can see all the way there and pretty much everything and when it starts advancing as well. So I'm going to be targeting things like probably Snow Troll Primes or Pack Hunters, things with lower nerve that I can maybe do something to. And let's go over to the enemy side. So you can see one of the Lords there, Flyers on this side, Flyer heavy. The other one there, Snow Troll Primes, Pack Hunters, more Snow Troll Primes, and there are the Ice Naiad. So I do not want my cavalry to fight unless I have to. So how do I want to tackle that unit? Let's go back to the wide shot. Ideally, I just don't want to tackle that unit. I would rather not fight them at all. But if I have to engage them, even though my cavalry are going to be hurt by the ensnare and the phalanx, these are still my hardest hitting units. So if I can throw in multiple of them into the front, because I'm probably not going to be allowed a flank with these, and at the same time try and get a flank set up with my individuals so that they're not suffering any hindrance. Maybe gargoyles, maybe my big flyer or the grotesque champion if they start going this way, if this thing comes forward and opens it up for me. If I can put anything into the flank at the same time, just you have to get rid of it in one go because it'll regenerate, and once you lose the initiative and you stop damaging it, it's going to get those wounds back and it's going to hit you quite hard as well. So you've got to get it in one go, I feel. So I've got to make a decisive strike against it if the chance arises. If it doesn't, I'm just going to try and stand off it, hopefully. So, on to turn 1. And my opponent is going first. And would I rather have gone first or second in this game? I can't remember if I actually chose to go first or second, or whether my opponent made the choice here. But if you go first, you obviously don't get the last chance at jumping onto the objectives in the last turn, which can be quite critical. So maybe going second is good in a mission like this. On the other hand, if you go first, you can advance onto some of the objectives early, and then the opponent has to then shift you from them. So those are some things to consider. Also, what kind of shooting output does the opponent have at long range? So my opponent is going first, advances up, the nice flyer block, and is threatening me with flyers. So that's going to limit my advance because this guy is covering down there as well. And hexes my wizard. So I'm not going to be doing any spells, and puts a wound on my gargoyles with some shooting, and a bit of shooting wounds my grotesque horde there as well. Bit more shooting, in fact, so 3 wounds. Okay, so I can't advance too far here while I'm in the view of this thing. So unless I can advance past its arc of sight there, if I can, then I can just advance freely. But this thing is the big danger right now to my plan. The plan is to not get flanked onto this force here, and that thing is threatening to do that. Turn 1 for me. So Bracky moves up outside of most of the enemy's line of sight, including this troll. The only unit that can see him are the Ice Naiads. And I did joke with my opponent that probably don't want to charge Bracky in that position, so I'm just going to leave him in your line of sight, because I think that would be a bad move to charge Bracky there, because they're probably not going to kill him in one round. And let's see, so they would pivot a bit and they would end up kind of like that probably. So they'd certainly be giving up a flank to the grotesques, which is just a terrible idea, so they're not going to do that. So I don't mind that they can see me, just hiding from everyone else. Susan, I think, is also out of the arc of sight of this guy. I've just put them in good little staging positions so they can then strike at something next turn, or if this unit starts advancing, that's when they would start looking for its flank to join in with a charge. I've put the grotesques up, so this thing, if it wants to charge them, is kind of an invitation, but it will be hindered if it does so, because I don't think they have Strider. My wounded gargoyles have gone into the woods, so they've got a bit of cover from the shooting, and then if they don't get killed, they could then charge into something else next turn from the woods. Okay, so over here, I'm not able to advance fully with everything. So I made sure that I am in the front arc with this thing here into the Immortal Guards. If it wants to charge them, again, it's free to do so. I don't know whether that would be a good idea unless it's part of a larger charging offensive. I've kept my half-breeds out of charge range of everything. I've kept this guy so that he can't be touched either because he's got everyone in the front and he's right up behind that unit. The Grotesque Champion is overhanging the front of the Grotesque Horde slightly so they could double charge him, but not the Horde. So, I've not left too optimal a charge option, I think. That's my hope anyway. We'll see how that turns out. And I think I do a wound with my rocket launcher on that thing as well. So, just setting up, not allowing too much to murder me yet. Turn 2 for my opponent. So does anyone decide to go in? Oh, we flip over some of the tokens now as well and find that there are 1-point objectives here. So that's where they are. So we flipped over 1 each, so we know that there's something worth fighting for in this area now. And this guy's flown away. The ice naiads have moved up, but not enough that I can just willy-nilly charge them with everything I've got. Because, importantly, they move up and they stay out of Susan's... Hold on. They're in Susan's arc, but they're in the front with Susan. Bracky, I think, has the flank, but he would be hindered if he takes that. These guys just reposition a little bit, and the ice elementals go into the woods. So Bracky can see them. So I'm tempted to send him in there, just because it's going to lock them down a bit. And the flyers are not that interested in charging into my obvious trap. So they hang back for now. And yeah, they just reline up a bit, shoot the gargoyles, and shoot the grotesque horde. And yeah, they do some quite good damage there. Look at that, up to 8 wounds now. So I'm now realising, actually, I don't know if I can just stand off this whole time, because the enemy does appear to have shooting superiority. Because my only source of serious shooting is going to be hexed for the entire game. So I'm not going to be able to fire back. So I may have to actually rethink it. The gargoyles get killed over there, and these grotesques get wavered. But they didn't have a charge yet anyway. So it's not too bad, and I can try and... I can't even heal them, but I can get Radiance of Life and Regeneration on them. So what am I going to do now? Susan is going to go after one of the Pack Hunter units. Turn 2 for me, so I advance up a bit more, because you can see this flyer moved over here into this crevice, so he's not overlooking this side anymore, so I can now advance freely. And it's now covering that side though. So it obviously feels like there is a threat here with all these units. So repositions to threaten this side, and Snow Troll Prime is inside this groove between the 2 pieces of impassable terrain, which I can't actually reach with any of my units, so the best I can do is block it with gargoyles maybe. So, advance is on, try and get some wounds back. Susan charges into the Pack Hunters, only just 3 wounds, which is really disappointing, and Bracky makes a hindered charge into the Ice Elementals. And the reason I'm quite happy doing this is because they're out of the arcs of sight of these units anyway, so they're not going to get multi-charged, and I'm just going to start chewing on them, because these are a potential annoyance for me. And also Bracky is in a good position where he can then join in on a charge on this unit later if it starts advancing. And we turn over some 0-point objectives, so just take him off the table. So we don't know how much that one's worth yet. There's also one here. So we just know about these 2 that are worth anything still. Turn 3 for the Northern Alliance. So what's going on here? Snow Foxes chaffing me up. Everyone else just taking position behind. This cannot be charged by my flyer because it's too close to the Snow Foxes. The Ice Naiads have moved forward into charge range of both of my units, so I've got the potential to send them both into combat. So these guys would be hitting on 6s, they would be hitting on 5s. But it may be worth it just to have one go to try and kill this unit, because otherwise it's just going to keep walking towards me. And I don't have the units to get around it particularly. More shooting damage is done to these grotesques, and they're killed. So yeah, I think I'm going to have to go in now, because otherwise I'm going to get shot to death. Susan takes 3 damage in retaliation, and Bracky does not. I think he takes a bit of shooting, perhaps. Maybe. I don't know if the Ice Elementals actually fought Bracky. Okay, so my flyer decides what would I like to do here. So there's a picture of it because it won't fit because there's too many wings everywhere, but I charge into the big flyer unit at the back there. So I'm not going to do any spellcasting, so I might as well shut them down. Do a couple of wounds, take away their thunderous charge. Everyone else decides that it's time to kill the Snow Foxes, and then I put the half-breeds up behind in such a way that they can't be charged, and the Grotesque Champion can't be multi-charged. Gargoyles just blocking in the Snow Troll from being able to hit the half-breeds here, who I put in with the Grotesques and Bracky. But unfortunately, I only do 7 wounds. So Grotesques hitting on 6s, you'd expect them to do probably 2 to 3 wounds. The half-breeds hitting on 5s, so you'd expect them to do possibly 3 to 5 wounds, and then Bracky coming out of there hindered, so only hitting on 4s, you'd expect him to do 3 wounds. So it's a little bit below what I would expect, but I wasn't expecting to kill them. I was hoping to, but I wasn't thinking that maths were totally on my side there. I just saw it as an opportunity to hope for a good turn of combat, as a good chance to maybe take them out, because you've got to throw multiple things at them when there's that ensnare and phalanx. You can't just throw one in, because you're going to do nothing. So unfortunately that didn't work out. Susan does some more wounds to the pack hunters, and she's now in danger because there's lots of units looking at her. And yeah, the fighting isn't going that well. I think my positioning started off okay in this game, but losing that horde of grotesques means that I've had to start throwing things in now, so it's going to get trickier. But we are uncovering a 1-point objective there, and a 2-pointer is now open as well behind this statue. So there are objectives around here worth fighting over. Turn 4 for the Northern Alliance. So Bracky gets hit by lots of things, but that's not going to be fun for him. And this unit actually turns round to fight Bracky. Now this really surprised me actually, because even though those other 2 units probably aren't enough to kill Bracky, it is a really big risk turning this unit around to fight him. So 2 goes, you're probably going to get him to double 1 with all those 3 units. But if you do roll a double 1, this unit dies, because obviously they've got their rear to 2 of my hard-hitting units. So that completely changes the game if he were to double 1 on Bracket here. So I'm surprised that the risk was taken, but if you're confident in not double 1ing and you want to get him dead, and then just turn around to face the units in the front that can't do much to you because of your phalanx and ensnare, then I can understand it from that point of view. Because he is the one that's going to be carrying the burden of damaging them going forward if he's alive. So I can understand it, but it is a risk. Susan gets multi-charged, so she might end up getting wavered as a result of that. I don't expect her to actually die, but she could. The enemy flyer decides that it's going to find a good spot to land over here, rather than charging in. And then these 2 pack hunter units charge into the Immortal Guard. And that could be scary. Snow Troll Prime goes into the flank of my big flyer, which is okay, but I've taken away the Thunderous from the birds, so they're not as scary now. And takes some wounds, but doesn't die, so that's good. The Immortal Guard takes some wounds, but don't die, which is good. Bracky does die, sadly, so he gets on to double 1, and had double 1 been rolled, that would have transformed the game, I think, but obviously it's very unlikely. So they turn round and then face my 2 cavalry units, and they've been healed and regenerated, so they're down to, I think, just 1 wound now. So it's as if I haven't even touched them. So if you don't kill them, it's not even worth trying, because they are going to get those wounds back. And they've still got the ensnare and phalanx looking right at me, so I'm not liking the look of this. So what would my other options have been to deal with this unit? So let me just go back and have a look at the state of play before I charged in. So, other options. These units aren't nimble, so I would have struggled to reposition them and look for a flank. And yeah, I don't think I actually could have done that at all, maybe. So the grotesques, let's see. If the half-breeds just made the charge on their own, then these guys would probably just countercharge the half-breeds and would have a chance at killing them, actually. So the grotesques would then have to turn and go over here. So maybe they could see the flank. Maybe. So maybe that's something that could have been considered there, just sending one of them in. But then you run the risk that they just get countercharged and die. And then they turn around to face your unit or turn around out of your charge arc. So potentially there were other options to deal with that. I also could have done something with this guy, maybe? Maybe flown him into a different position? rather than attacking those flyers back there. Yeah, because you've really got to commit a lot to taking down a unit like this, and maybe what I committed wasn't enough. Maybe I took Susan too far away. Maybe her helping out as well would have tipped it more in my favour. It's hard to say. It's just a really tough matchup, this unit, for my army to deal with. And I don't know if I have all the tools that would be best equipped to take it out. So I did what I thought gave me a chance, and it didn't quite work out. So the gargoyles are killed, as you'd expect. The Snow Troll Prime over here helps out and deals with Susan, so she's dead as well. And onto my turn 4. And I go back in there with 2 units. Get some decent damage, actually, considering Phalanx and Ensnare. But not enough to kill them, sadly. Now, obviously, looking at 10 wounds, had Bracky still been alive, then suddenly that's a situation where they could easily die that turn with that amount of damage rolled. The Immortal Guard are hanging out here because who was there before? So I've killed off both these units, I think, now. I've killed off one of them, and the other one... Yeah, I think I just double charged that one to guarantee that I'd kill it, and then I turn this unit to protect the Immortal Guard, who have turned their back on the enemy here. And if the Pack Hunters want to charge into the Half-Breeds, that means that this guy can't rear charge the Immortal Guard. And my Grotesque Champion steams in from down here into the flank of the Snow Troll Prime, where you would hope to obviously kill it anytime you're flanking something, but only get a waver, and then do more damage with my big flyer there onto the enemy birds. 2-point objective has been revealed, but it's quite far away from me, and 1-point objective revealed there. So at this point we know where all the money is. We've got 2 points there, 2 points there, 1 there, 1 there. There's 1 around here somewhere. But it's not looking too good for me. So the reason I turn the Immortal Guard to face that way is because I think this guy is going to flank charge the Half-Breed unit. One thing I didn't consider is that if he does that, I don't know whether they'd actually be able to fit to rear charge him, because this big statue's here. So I don't know if that was actually the right move. Probably not, because I don't think they can fit in there. And on the Northern Alliance turn, you can see them all just moving towards this 2-point objective. They're putting multiple units there in case they get rocketed to death. And these Half-Breeds are taking a bit of a beating there. The Snow Troll Prime just runs away a bit. And the rocket launcher takes a bit of shooting damage. And look at all this damage on the Half-Breeds, and they're dead, as you'd expect. And the Grotesques are also dead. And this big flyer of mine, my spellcaster, is wavered but does have Fury, so he's going to be able to have another go at them. And the Immortal Guard are looking kind of lonely there. They are on an objective, but I don't think they're going to be able to hold that. I think the objective has actually been slid along by a unit, and it should be over here somewhere. On to my turn 5. So, I do mop up these units, Snow Troll Prime and the birds, but that's not going to do me too much good. The Immortal Guard, because this guy, after he did the kill, turned round and made sure I definitely wouldn't be able to charge this unit, because I just wouldn't fit, the Immortal Guard decide, you know what, we'll give you a taste of your own medicine. So we're going to, after we, since we've got nothing else to do, we're going to turn around to face this way, give you our flank, but you can't fit in our flank now either. So, no. They're just going to dance around this pillar, these 2 units, and not kill each other if they want. Obviously this is a flyer, so it can reposition next turn. But I just thought that was quite funny, the Immortal Guard just doing the same thing to the flyer that it just did to them. And yeah, I'm obviously not going to win this game, but I can still score points, because I have got scoring units and there are objectives on the table, so that could be useful for tiebreakers later on, scoring more points. Turn 6 for Northern Alliance, so just spreading out onto all the objectives, as you'd expect, and shooting the rocket launcher, and getting in position to kill the Immortal Guard next turn. And they do actually kill off my big flyer, sadly. So, in my turn 6, the Grotesque Champion is just going to run away and go to an objective, and the Immortal Guard are going to try and kill this unit. Because I could rear-charge the Grotesque Champion into that unit. But what does that really achieve? If I kill the unit, I have 1 victory point. However, Grotesque Champion could just run away and get 1 victory point anyway. And then if the Immortal Guard kill them, I would then maybe have 2. So guaranteeing 1 point, or guaranteeing 1 point and possibly getting 2. So I decided not to do the rear charge there. If it was a tournament scoring system that heavily rewarded kill points, then obviously that is a really juicy target for turn 6 to just murder something. But it's all about the winning, and then after that it is victory points. So the Immortal Guard do not kill the unit, but the Grotesque Champion does get onto that objective, and the game ends there. So it is a loss, but I did get a victory point out of it. And I think this is just a very, very good list. Obviously a very, very good player, who I don't think I've ever beaten. I did get a draw against once, but that was quite a few years ago. And he usually wins the events that he attends. It would be hard pressed to win an event he didn't attend, but if anyone could do it, it would probably be him. So yeah, we actually had like a bingo card that one of the players made for this event, and one of the things you could tick off on it was play one of the big 3, the usual 3 players that seem to scoop up all the top prizes whenever they go to the events, and this was one of those players. So on to round 3, and this is another player who I've played before with Kingdoms of Men, so you will have seen this army, because I don't know if he actually plays anything else. I may only have seen him play Kingdoms of Men. And got a horde of foot guard. So these are actually quite scary because they hit on 3s with 25 attacks, which is pretty tasty. Then there are some bowmen, a horde of them, 24-inch range shooting attack. So we're not seeing a lot of crushing so far, so I'm expecting to see Bane Chant in a minute. Okay, now we get to the juicy stuff. So Knights. Knight Cavalry Regiment with Thunderous Charge 2. Okay, so as soon as I look at that, I think that is the optimal Susan target. It's slower than her, it relies on Thunderous Charge. So if she can get a hit in on it, take away its Thunderous. It does hit on 3s, so it does have a chance to hit back at her, but it won't have any kind of boost to its hitting power unless there's Bane Chant. However, there is then a Cavalry Horde, which I look at and see Brew of Sharpness and think, that's less of an optimal Susan target, because it's going to get a billion hits against her with 32 attacks, which is an obscene amount of attacks on 2s. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing I want to lead into difficult terrain, really. That's what I'm thinking when I see that unit. Then there are some Beast Cavalry, so a large cavalry horde that fly, so that's quite scary. And they have Thunderous Charge 1 and Vicious, as well as Crushing Strength 1. So not totally reliant on Thunderous Charge, but they do have the Boots of Striding as well. So we're not seeing too much Pathfinder or Strider so far, but we do have the boots there. 3 Ballistas, which are a war machine that's just quite reliable. Hits on a 4 with 2 attacks, but doesn't do a huge amount of damage. Piercing 2. So comparable to the rocket launcher, half as many attacks, but hits on 4 and does have more piercing, so pretty good. There is a Giant, which has Slayer, so that's going to be good against some of my bigger stuff. Army Standard Bearer with Bane Chant, yep, here we go, Bane Chant. Then there is a Wizard with Bane Chant again, Lightning Bolt and Hex, so Hex, my Wizard is going to spend the whole game hexed again, probably, because there's also another Wizard with Shroud of the Saint for extra heal, so heal 5, Lightning Bolt, and yeah, so a bit of healing in there as well. And then there's another page. 2 generals on winged beasts. So anytime that it goes on to the next page, you get to the end and think, yeah, that's going to be quite a tough army to face. And then what? There's more? So yes, there are 2 more units on the other page. 2 generals on winged beasts. So kind of mid-range flying hero. Not on par with like a dragon, but they're still decent. Hit on 3s, Crush 2, Thunderous 1, and 7 attacks. So they're good. And the scenario, I'm just going to pull up the old tournament pack here. So this one is Hold the Line. And if you're not familiar with that scenario, I'll explain it in a moment. So you can see on my left flank, I've got all my grotesques. I make sure to keep 3 of my units that can boost up his spellcasting around him, if it's a viable option, because then I can give him his maximum number of spell dice, if he actually gets to use them and doesn't get hexed, and gargoyles to deliver them into combat without them dying first, and Grotesque Champion there as well. On my right flank I've got Brekkie, Mortal Guard, the other half-breeds, Susan. So the enemy right flank contains only a flying hero, that's it. Everything else is in this blob in the corner, so there's knights, flying knights, bowmen, foot infantry, infantry there that are just good at fighting, the giant, cavalry horde, another flyer, and the ballistas spread about. So there's the wide chart of the table. This scenario, hold the line. So at the end of the game, you score victory points for controlling the areas. So it's marked out on these mats, which were very nicely prepared for the event. So this area here, which I am moving the arrow around now, that area is worth 2 victory points at the end of the game if you have the most unit strength in there. This one over here, which I am moving the mouse around now, that one is worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. And this one in the middle, which I'm moving the mouse around now, is worth 3 victory points at the end of the game. So really, if you're just looking for the win, you're not bothered about the margin of victory, you don't need to focus on all of them. You can focus on this sort of area here or this sort of area here, you can contest both of those, which would be enough to win the game. Or you could also hit both the flanks and ignore the middle, if you've got an army that wants to spread out. And yeah, this is a really serious blob of kingdoms of men in the corner there. There's a little castle, and I'm going to have to cover my advance towards it with gargoyles. There is some shooting, so it might not be a good idea to actually put the gargoyles out early, because they could just get shot down and then I've got no chaff left. So, how am I going to approach this? Those knights, I don't think are in that great of a position, because there's some woods there. They don't have any Strider or Pathfinder. And the units that I'm sending in that direction, I think, would be able to shut them down. So Susan, she's going to have a dual purpose here. She's deterring this flyer from getting into my flank, and she's also going to go knight hunting, because that's the target I've identified. The one thing that she's going to be best at killing is that knight unit. Brekkie is also potentially going to move out into the middle here a bit, and maybe chase after the bowman. And shutting down the shooting, of course, which would be nice. The Immortal Guard are just there to give me some unit strength. So the unit strength 3, they're very slow, but they're just going to walk into the middle. And this is where all my hard-hitting stuff is mainly focused, so I'm going to try and get in, use my gargoyles to chaff up the Knight Horde, so they can't get me. And yeah, it's going to be tough, because there's some hard-hitting units here. So, very impressive. Very cool giant there. Turn 1, and I go first, and I choose to take the first turn, because you'll see what I want to do on the other side in a minute. So, we've got the Grotesque Champion advancing up, everyone else just kind of staying in line, just advancing through the difficult terrain, so not too fast, keeping them back so they're not going to get charged, because I think I have to leave something in charge range of some of the flyers, otherwise I just can't advance. And I want to advance, so I'm not going to get hit by too much though, that's devastating, but the half-breeds are a bit more susceptible to being punched in the face than the grotesques, so they hang back a little bit. Mortal Guard advance up, so Susan's positioning and Brekkie's positioning. The rocket launch hits nothing. So, Susan is not in the woods. She's just outside the woods, so the knights can't see her yet. Brekkie is in a position where he is out of charge range of the knights, but if the knights do not move, Brekkie would then get his free pivot, which brings the front of his base actually to here, which then would leave him in charge range. So the knights don't want to make the mistake of thinking that they're safe from Brekkie either. Brekkie has also put himself in a spot where he can charge the archers next turn if they stand still. And if they start going backwards, that means they're going to be worse at shooting, they're going to be messing up the whole battle line, I think. So they don't really want to be going backwards. So, if the knights come forward, not into the woods, that means they're limiting their line of sight. If they come forward and look through this gap here, then I can charge them with Brekkie, and Susan can perhaps, either if she can see the archers, she can charge them in the flank, or she can also just fly over the back and land over here somewhere and then charge something in the rear. So I think I've got a good setup in this area here. Immortal Guard just there for the good unit strength, and if this big flyer wants to go and land over here somewhere, then I'm just going to run away. If it lands here and immediately threatens to charge my units, but outside of charge range of them, for example, out of my half-breeds, then Susan would then be used to charge that flyer, because I think she would eventually win that fight if she gets the first hit. My rocket launcher is positioned here because I can see past this rock to those knights there, and then I can see over to this side when things start advancing. So there are some big things over there as well, like the flying cavalry and the giant that I'll be able to see over the top of some of my own troops as well, when they come forward far enough. So turn 1 for the enemy. Are these knights terrified? They do actually move a bit to make sure that Bracky can't do the sneaky pivot and charge, so they're wise to that one. The Lord moves forward, and I get hexed, of course, with my flyer, who's not looking in this direction, by the way. It's just because his face is too pointy and he was poking the gargoyles. So, there is a bit of an advance in some areas, but not a lot. So they're kind of happy with this formation, and in some, actually move back with some of the units, do they? Let me go back and have a look. I don't know if anything actually moves back, actually. A couple of things move forward a bit, but not much. The giant does, this unit does, and then the hex. So yeah, very conservative start from the Kingdoms of Men. So what am I going to do here? Let's find out. So, I throw the gargoyles out in front to cover my advance because I've got the speed advantage here. So, if my opponent does not engage the gargoyles, then I will be able to hit lots of targets next turn because the gargoyles can just fly out the way. And I don't mind about charging into difficult terrain. The knights are not getting in, the foot soldiers are not getting in. They can hit the gargoyles. This base was put here because I was making sure that my positioning of the gargoyles didn't allow the giant to get between them, and the gap's not quite big enough. And then this flyer can obviously hit my half-breeds now, but I decide that's something I'm willing to accept because I can't cover everything and I'd rather stop the giant getting in. And I don't want to hang out of its charge range because I have to be too far back. So I'm coming forward, inviting the charge. I'd hope to kill it on the counter anyway. And I'm inspired, so I don't think it's going to kill me in one round, especially with their boosted nerve that they got in the latest update. Bracky has gone into the bowman and done 6 wounds. And Susan has flown back over here to cover where this flyer's gone. So if it wants to then come over here, she can then charge it. And these units are just moved away, so they're not going to get into the danger zone. So that's how we're looking. These knights are still kind of pinned there for the moment. And if they want to get into the game, they're going to have to advance out now. They are covering that flank, though. But I'm not really sending anything over there at the moment, because I'm concerned about this flyer, so I'm defending against it with Susan there. So, my opponent has to actually do something now. These flyers, I don't think they can... Don't know whether they might actually be in the flank of Bracky, so they might be able to charge him. But then they would be giving up their flank to the grotesque champion, which might not be the move to make. So we'll see whether my opponent actually does that. And then this flyer, probably into the half-breeds, is the best option there, because I've got the flanks of the grotesques covered. And you've got to kill the gargoyles, because otherwise they'll just chaff you up again, and they'll open up the lanes for me to charge through them. So, turn 2. The flyer actually says, "Hey, Susan, I'm not scared of you at all. I'm just going to land right next to you. Do you want to fight?" And it's threatening my war machine. The flying lord there goes into my half-breeds as expected. And then the night horde charges the gargoyles. And the giant flanks the gargoyles, so I think they're going to die. The other gargoyles get hit by the horde of foot soldiers. And the giant, his big weapon is too pointy, so he has to be replaced with this empty base. And the knights are positioning themselves outside of the charge arc of the half-breeds, and they've gone into the woods. So I've got a choice to make now. Does Susan try and kill this flyer? Because I'd be hitting it in the flank, which means that I can't stop it charging my war machine. Or do I just charge the knights, hindered, and take away their thunderous charge, and stop them charging my other units? And you'll see what I choose in a moment. Now, if this guy had been positioned slightly differently, I might have had to make a different decision, but he wants to keep his options open. He wants to be able to charge anything that's over there, but also threaten my war machine. At this stage, I decide, you know what, I'm going to get everything else out of the way. Don't give you any charge options except the war machine. And if you want to hit the war machine, I will accept that because it's more than 20 inches away from any of my other stuff. So once you've hit it, you've got at least one more turn of repositioning before you can fight, and I can live with that. And that's only if you kill it. So you could double one it. So I'll be very happy if my war machine gets attacked here. That's not because it's necessarily a bad move, because killing a rocket launcher stops it picking off wounded units at the end of the game. It's just, I think for my game plan, I think this guy being out the way frees up some of my other units to go after other objectives. So, Bracky is being hit back by the bowman in combat, and my wizard gets hexed again, obviously. And 2 damage done there. And Gargoyle's dead, as expected. Half-breed's not dead, as expected. And other Gargoyle's dead. And a bit of repositioning on the part of these units here. So, I've got a very spicy double front charge into these guys, potentially, with my 2 grotesque hordes, which would kill off a very dangerous big horde. I've then got a counter charge on this unit here. Have I got anything that can block in the knights at this stage, though? It's not looking like it, so let's see what I'm going to do here, because I've also got my big flyer who can do something. He's going to have to attack something, probably. Grotesque Champion is hanging out there, in charge range to attack something as well. Bracky is hanging out. So, turn 3, let's see what happens. Susan goes after the knights. I'm just leaving my war machine to die. And she does a point of damage, taking away their thunderous charge, so they're very unlikely to do much to her on the counter. I get out of the charge arc of this thing with my Immortal Guard and half-breeds. I put the Grotesque Champion into the archers, so he was positioned here last turn. So he makes that charge into there. And he kind of tags in. Because, obviously, if he'd not been within charge range, then I would have still wanted to shut down the shooting, so Bracky may have had to stay there, because Bracky wanted to join in with this fight instead. And he went into the flank there, those 2 go in the front, and Grotesque Champion charges into the bows to take over where Bracky left off. And gets them up to 9 wounds, they're still not shooting. Kill off the horde of foot soldiers with that triple charge, and then I just try and make sure I'm not going to get flanked by anything, basically. And I do use my flyer. I put it into the flank of the enemy flyer. Now, this is going to hopefully stop the Knight Horde getting to my half-breeds. However, I have made a mistake as well here. Or, I'm not sure if that's happened yet, actually. Now, there is a mistake coming up with him. I'm not sure if it's in this exact moment. It may well be. So, turn 3. We've got the giant and my flying opponent there into 1 unit of grotesques, try and double up and take them out. The Knight Horde go into this guy. Now, he is turned side on, but I think that's just to allow him to actually fit the base there. He's too pokey. So yeah, lots of blank bases standing in for things at the moment. The flying character over here does actually go for my war machine, so I'm pleased about that, tying him up. But again, it's not necessarily a bad move, because you don't want this thing shooting your wounded units in the final turn, so killing it might not be bad. I just think this guy maybe getting behind my lines early would have been a bigger threat than killing this, personally. So there's some Bane chant going off around here, including onto Susan. And let's see if they're doing damage in combat. So they do Waver Susan, they do 8 damage, which is more than I was thinking they would do. But with Bane chant, of course, they always give themselves a chance, so good Waver there. And the War Machine is killed, and the Flyer turns around to actually face the action again. And my big Flyer is murdered. So actually, yeah, I think this was the situation here. So, I think... Or was it? I don't remember if this is in a different game, so it could be a spoiler for the next game, actually, because I did get this guy into lots of fights. So, I backed him up and forgot which way he was supposed to be facing because I turned him a different way to let him fit into the base, which led to him being flanked. But I don't know if that was actually this combat. So he's dead anyway. So I don't know if it was this game. It might be the next game, actually. So spoiler alert. However, look at these grotesques. Double wand. Bow, 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 bow. So loads of wounds. They're actually devastated, but they have been double wand. So the grotesques are still alive. So that's going to be very handy. So if they died, what would I be doing next? There would be limited pivoting options here because I've got a unit right there, so they wouldn't have been able to do too much. They could have got me in the front though, so I still would have been able to charge them. This guy could turn to face that way perhaps. Actually, I don't know if he would want to do that because then he would get... Would he get hit by them? I don't think I could actually reach him. So no, I think the knights would have been blocking that. I'm going to hit the knights here though. So yeah, double one, quite important there. So that's Susan being wavered, bad. Double wanting the grotesques, good. Turn 5 for me. So, charge the half-breeds into the knights, do some decent damage actually, but don't kill them, so I expect these to die on the counter. This unit of grotesques counters the giant, and it's no longer devastated due to regeneration. The other grotesques and Bracky charge into the flank of the flying knights and murder them, and the Immortal Guard are coming this way as well because they want to be in position where they can maybe apply their unit strength in either of these sections at the end of the game for scoring purposes. The Grotesque Champion does a little bit more damage to them, but it's a slog getting through this bowman horde. Susan backs away from combat, allowing these half-breeds to get into the knights, and they do some wounds but don't kill them. And there we go. So this guy, because he went after that war machine, he is now down here. He's got to spend one more turn either going here, or thinking about going to find somewhere to score at the end of the game, so maybe he'll go for this section. But if he hadn't, if he'd just flown here, he would be looking at some really juicy stuff right now. He'd be looking at a flank there, maybe a rear there. If he'd flown into... I don't think he would have been able to reach the woods. But just flying down here would have been really scary, I think. So I'm glad he went over there. But I do understand going after the war machine as well. Turn 5, so what's my opponent going to do? He's going to get this guy back into the action. Start moving up. Bane chant the knights against the half-breeds. And giant into these guys, knights into these. Dead. Dead. So I lose the half-breeds, lose the grotesques, but they should have been dead anyway. So, my opponent is currently holding this section with unit strength, because these knights are worth 4. So I need to get both of these units in here in order to take it off him, because the giant's worth 2 as well, so I need to kill the giant, really. Because I've got a total of 6 here, so does my opponent. So to take it, I need to kill this giant. The half-breeds take 5 damage in return there, but fine. Grotesque Champ takes another wound, but he's also fine. And this guy is not actually that eager to come closer. So the reason why is because he doesn't want to get charged by Susan. Because if she makes a charge on him, if he comes up to here, for instance, gets charged by Susan and takes a wound, he then can't fly anymore and wouldn't be able to easily pivot through her to hit anything particularly juicy, probably. So it's staying out of Susan's range and thinking long-term about scoring now, because this area is totally open. So he could easily fly in there on the last turn and take it. Turn 6 for me, so potentially my last turn, so I need to get in a scoring position. The grotesques charge in and murder the giant, and the Immortal Guard get into this section as well. So I'm now up 6-4. So as long as these units live, I'll hold this section. The half-breeds kill the knights and then turn round, so that they are facing areas that they can go into and score if there's a turn 7. This guy is still being an annoyance, and the Grotesque Champion just turns around, being nimble, does 2 pivots and just walks away from the bowman to get into this section, to currently hold that with unit strength 1. So what can my opponent do here in turn 6? This guy can either come in here and contest this very valuable area, which is worth 3 victory points. He could then try and shoot off the Grotesque Champion, who's on 2 damage. He could fly into that section, which is guaranteed money, because I'm not getting in there if it ends on turn 6. He could then still shoot off the Grotesque Champion and make it a draw, or he could shoot off these Grotesques and take this section off me, which means that my opponent would have this one, and maybe that one as well. Or he could go in here and contest this one, and have this one by killing the Grotesques, because they are on 3 wounds already. The Immortal Guard are not wounded, so they're not as good a target. So it all comes down to the Wizards and the Ballistas, who haven't done a huge amount so far. But I haven't even mentioned them, really. I've thought about attacking them once or twice, but didn't bother. You'll notice also that Susan and Bracky finally finished off the Bowmen as well, so they've got no chance of joining in, because I didn't want to leave them to rear charge the Grotesque Champion and then overrun into the scoring area. That would have been a horrific, truly horrific move. So send those in, finish them off, they're dead. Now the only scoring unit my opponent has left over here, the Knights and him. So if you were in this situation and you were the Kingdoms of Men, what would you do? Where would you send this guy? Where would you fire your Ballistas? Would you go for the Grotesque Champion or the Grotesque Horde? His nerve is 1 lower than theirs, so they're actually equally close to death, although these guys are not inspired and he is. So maybe that's the deciding factor. So gunning down this unit takes this section off me. You could then fly over there and take that section and then win 4-3. Yeah, so let me know what you'd do. So turn 6 goes into the empty section on his own to score that. And then they're going to start gunning down the Grotesques. The Knights have also turned round to face them in case there is another turn as well. But if there is another turn, these Knights are just toast if the Grotesques are still alive anyway, because they're already on 13 damage. And up to 7 wounds on the Grotesques, but can't quite roll enough to remove them. So at the moment I am winning by virtue of holding these 2 sections, which give me 5 points, and my opponent is on 2 points for the section on the far right. Is there going to be another turn? Let's find out. No, there is no turn 7, so it's a win for me. And if there was a turn 7, what would have happened? The Knights would have died. These have all been moved, by the way, but they were put back on to calculate what was left alive. So the Knights would have been charged by the Grotesques and hopefully killed, and Susan and Bracky would have gone after a couple of war machines probably and killed them. So I think it would have been more comfortable. I could have also moved the half-breeds into this table section on turn 7 as well and taken that off him. So then his move probably would have been whatever shooting remained, target the half-breed champion, who could maybe hide in the woods possibly, and then move into this table section to contest it to make it a smaller loss potentially. But yeah, turn 7 probably would have been good for me, but I'm happy to just have the game end there and take the win. So 2 wins on day 1, so already up to twice as many wins as the last time at Masters, which is obviously the dream, and going on to day 2 in a decent position. So the next mission is Rack and Ruin, and for anyone not familiar with this one, I wouldn't blame you because I don't see it very often. It is a progressive scoring scenario, which you don't see a lot of in Kings of War. You see it a lot in other game systems. So if you've watched my Age of Sigmar reports, pretty much every mission in that game is progressive scoring. You gain points every turn that count towards the victory. And you have 2 kind of dominate zones, 1 on each side of the board. And for each one of those you hold at the end of rounds 3, 4 and 5, you get a victory point. And then there's an objective in the middle that you can get onto at the end of the game to get another victory point. So it's possible to win the game way before the end. Now, this is the list I'm up against. Now, don't be misled here, because it may say spare player list, but this guy is actually a very good player. And a very similar list to this is what I lost against at last year's Masters with my Night Stalkers. So, what is in it? There is a lot of exploding rats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 regiments of exploding rats. And then another 2 regiments of exploding rats. And then there's a horde of exploding rats. So, yeah, 1 billion rats, and they all explode. Which means that when you kill them, any unit in combat with them will then take 2d3 hits at piercing 2. So, my units don't really want to deal with that. Half-breeds certainly wouldn't like that. Grotesques can handle it a bit better, but not much. My heroes wouldn't really like to have that either. Gargoyles wouldn't care because they're going to die anyway. So yeah, if I could get gargoyles finishing them off, or better still, shoot them off the table, because what you'll notice here is there is no hex at all, which means my wizard can finally use Fireball 21. So, other than the slaves, there are also some death engines. These are the things that normally do the damage here. Because what you might think is with all these slaves, you just don't necessarily engage them that much and just kind of block them in, and then the good stuff can't get past. With Ratkin, if there's some really big, like a hard-hitting horde behind them. But no, all the hard-hitting stuff actually has a really narrow frontage. So you've got the two death engines, which are chariot-sized. You have got the Gore Impaler, which is the same kind of thing as a death engine, except it's a special character. Yeah, because it's unique. You can only take one. And this one has battering ram, which means it can do an overrun through units that are not individuals and then impact another unit and do another combat. So that is a very scary thing. There is an Overmaster on Ancient Winged Halfbreed with the Brew of Haste. So speed 11, so it's faster than all my flyers, so that is a big threat as well. And can be a threat from behind the slaves, importantly. So that's something to be worried about. And a Taskmaster on a Chariot, so another narrow frontage unit that can pick between the slaves. So I do have to be concerned about this list. It has a lot more unit strength than me, a lot more units than me. So there is the setup. The two dominate areas are kind of where I'm circling my mouse now. So one of them is over on this side, and one of them is over on this side. So those two areas, you get victory points from turns 3, 4, and 5 if you have more unit strength in there. So what's my plan here? It's a terrible idea for me to split my force in half and try and go for both of them, because it's just not going to happen. I don't have the unit strength, and it's going to take me a long time to chew through all the slaves. So what I started to do in deployment is to put more of my force on one side, which is over here, and then when I saw that my opponent was putting the bulk of his force over on this side as well, I thought, you know what, I'll see what's over there. Doesn't seem like it's a lot, so I'm just going to put enough over here so I can beat it, and I'm going to put my flyer in a position where I can maybe come over and help. Because, yeah, I don't think this side is going to go well. I may eventually end up winning the fight, but I'm definitely not going to win victory points against all this unit strength, because it's going to take me too long to get through it. So what I'm hoping to do is murder this side where there are far less units, and hold this side. And then use this side to not die too fast to the enemy and maybe start chewing through them. And if I'm winning, obviously great, I would just win the game because I think this side is in my favour. And if I'm losing, lose slow enough so that my force is able to take the centre before this force does. That is the goal anyway. This flyer is a problem though. He's faster than all my stuff, so I need to get him to do something. I need to ground him. So either threaten him with something, or make him think that I don't want him over here. That's the last thing I want, because these units can't really advance. I've only got one unit of gargoyles to screen with. So if he comes over here, he just prevents me from coming forwards, and this is the area I want to score. So what I want to do is make this area look unappealing to him, so he just flies over here somewhere and joins in with this big fight instead, where it's more manageable because I've got more units and it's more congested. So that's the plan. I've got my rocket launcher there who can just start shooting out. I don't know whether to shoot slaves or the death engines though, because they're obviously a big threat at fighting, but if you shoot the slaves, they can't explode on you. So that's quite important as well. I've made sure to put my flyer fairly close to the middle, because it's not a full-on counter to that flyer, but it can kind of do the same role. If it needs to come this way because this guy's hassling me too much, I can maybe threaten him by landing here and force it to either come and hit me, which means I'm then free to advance with everything else, or then charge it if it doesn't want to engage, or force it to fly somewhere else anyway. So, Grotesque Champion all the way out in the flank. It can go straight into the woods, which means that the enemy charging it would be hindered. There's not much Strider or Pathfinder opposite me. There is a little bit. I think it might be, let's see, could well be the Gore Impaler. Does that have Strider at all? Don't know. I feel like there's something in there that does. Or it could just be nothing at all. I could have imagined it. Oh, there we go. Yep. It's the Aura Strider infantry only on the Overmaster. That was the one. I just didn't read out his entry earlier. So he's actually over here with these infantry. So they're going to be able to ignore all that difficult terrain. And fight me quite handily over there. But they're all crummy slaves. So I'm not worried about that fight. Just this guy's the problem. So there he is. And there's the guy that's causing me the headache. All the hard-hitting stuff. Particularly these death engines. The chariots hit less hard, but they still do pack a bit of a punch, and speed is quite a big deal here as well. So these things have a potential charge, I believe, of 19 inches, because they're speed 8 and they have wild charge D3. So if I stay out of their charge range, I'm barely advancing at all. Now, is that a big problem? Me not advancing on the left? I don't know. But it does mean that they could start funneling resources into the centre, which would be difficult to shift them from, and that means that they would maybe get a point for that at the end of the game. So I feel like I do have to fight here to stop them just moving things into the middle. So yeah, this is going to be a tough matchup, because the stuff that I'm wanting to hit is going to explode on me when I kill it. So turn 1, and I think I force my opponent to go first here. The reason being, I'm so under unit strength compared to the enemy. I want to go second in every turn, because you score at the end of the round, so after both players have had a turn. So if I see that I'm down unit strength in this section, for instance by 1, and I've got my flyer available, I can then maybe just fly into this section and add 2 more and maybe take it. So I want to be able to move my unit strength around at the time that it's crucial for scoring and go last for that reason. So the downside to going second here is that the enemy can push forward onto the scoring areas. But I don't think I'm going to stop that anyway. There's no reason for the slaves not to march forward as fast as they can and get in combat, even if I go first and push up. So I let the enemy go first. And of course there's a wall of slaves, so nothing particularly juicy to hit. Many of them in the woods. So yeah, it's very scary. This guy is the most scary of all. So what am I going to do to try and deter him from coming this way? Because I don't want him over here. I think that's a really good matchup if he's not here. I'm going to put gargoyles over here, and I'm going to put the half-breeds directly behind them so that he can't charge them. And then I'll try and stop him from hitting the grotesques. And he may then think, oh, if I don't charge those gargoyles, then they'll charge me and then ground me. So he'll think, actually, forget that, I'm just going to fly away and not mess with you at all, because those gargoyles have scared me now, because they've got half-breeds behind them, so if I charge in and kill them, I then get hit. So hopefully he'll run away. And I have noticed as well that these slaves have come up to within Susan's charge range, so that's actually a good way to make a start on killing them. So I move the grotesque champion into the woods, so he is in range of one of the death engines, but he's in the woods, so it would be hindered. Bracky moves out into the middle. The reason Bracky is a good one for this role is because he's got very narrow frontage, so he's not going to get hit by that many enemy units at once. Keeping things in the front, so not many of them can actually hit him. I'm keeping my gargoyles back a bit. This unit here is just covering my half-breeds again, because they have the same frontage width, so they're a good unit to block that. So if the death engine wants to hit the gargoyles, it can, because then I'll be able to hit it. Now, I think this is the one that can overrun and then fight 2 units. So I've stayed at a certain distance, so that I think they have to roll 3 probably on the wild charge to actually reach in the first place, I think. But if I stayed completely out their charge range, then I just wouldn't be able to move. So I'm taking the risk and just moving up into the upper ends of their wild charge range with most of my units. I'm not letting them hit any of my big hitter stuff immediately. Rocket launcher does 3 wounds to this engine, which is a nice start, and Susan gets into these slaves, does 2 wounds, and it's a start, and no one else can charge her yet, so I'm quite happy with that start. Want to get these guys dead before the scoring starts at the end of turn 3. Grognard says, have you played Old World yet? Thoughts and comparisons to Kings of War? Well, I will give you some thoughts on that actually at the end of this review, at the end of this tournament report, because I am going heavily into Old World as well as Kings of War and Dead Zone and other game systems. So I'll do a bit of a comparison at the end and let you know my thoughts on that, and then there will be more video content in the future on the Old World as well, in addition to Kings of War. Don't go thinking that it's going to take any of my Kings of War time away, because I attend a lot of tournaments for different systems, and yeah, it's not going to affect Kings of War in the slightest. I think I seem to be able to manage keeping multiple rule sets in my head, which I know some people struggle with, and I seem to be alright at it though, keeping everything separate so I don't get mixed up between game systems too much. So, I've got that set up here. If you were this flying Overmaster, I think you look for something else to do. I don't think you want to come here, because you either hit the gargoyles or something else hits you. I've put the grotesques in the shadow of my half-breeds on the hill, so that the Overmaster can't see over the combined height of the hill with the unit to see the grotesques. So if you were to fly down here, for instance, the grotesques will hit you. If you charge the gargoyles, the half-breeds will hit you, so I'm encouraging you to leave the area, or to fly away so that you're not a threat anymore. The other thing you could do is fly back here and turn to face Susan, so that you can join in the fight from this end, but then you're kind of blocked by the woods, so you can't charge over the woods to get to the other units. So yeah, run away, please, Mr. Overmaster. Where else could you go? You could go down here. No, you can't really, because I think these guys will hit you off the hill. Yeah, so I think you have to run away. I think that's your best bet. So turn 2. A couple of the slave units go into Bracky, and 2 of the death engines, this is the one that can do super overruns, they both roll the maximum D3 on their wild charge. They both make it to the gargoyles, so that's actually quite scary now. So it would have to overrun 3 inches to also hit the half-breeds. So I didn't really need to put them that close behind, but I decided to take the risk anyway, because it's quite a lot of elements. First of all, it has to roll really high on the wild charge, then it has to kill the gargoyles who are inspired, and not double one them, then it has to roll a 3+, then it has to do sufficient damage to the half-breeds, then it has to roll 2 nerve checks on them as well. So I think all those hoops that it has to jump through, I think on average the half-breeds are not going to get killed in this situation, but they've already passed the first test, which was the wild charge. So obviously it's a scary, tense situation there. Bracky should be fine against all those slaves, and you can see everything is very congested here. But they are going to keep scoring this area, because look at all this unit strength, it's just 1 billion. So these guys are just repositioning and threatening Susan with a double charge next turn. Now the Overmaster actually decides to go for my gargoyles, and I don't think that was the right move, but the plus side to it is that you're getting rid of a threat, because it depends what you want to do. So if you're going in here, let's see how far away that is on the wide shot. So they're fighting on this hill, or putting units on this hill that want to fight. Gargoyles could then maybe flank those units. So you are covering your advance. This unit has a charge to about here as well, I think. So maybe even more than that. So I can understand this actually on the basis that you want to advance up here and not be flanked. So I do get it. So it flies in there, obviously going to kill them. Kills the gargoyles and then overruns to get onto the hill to stop my half-breeds charging down the hill to hit you. I think that was the thinking there. Although the fact that it is now on the hill means the grotesques can also see it, which is interesting. So Susan actually gets wavered on 3 damage there, which I find hilarious. Especially when Susan gets wavered, because she doesn't have Fury, so she's kind of stuck for a turn now. Nerve roll of 11 to do that. Bracky only takes 2 wounds though, so he's absolutely fine. And the gargoyles get killed there, and the Impaler does successfully get 3 or more inches to get into the half-breeds. Does 12 damage, which is a very good amount of damage, but then only wavers them. So, they get away with it. The gamble paid off. All the hoops that this guy had to jump through to kill this unit, all those hurdles that were put in front of it, it just fell at the final one. So a bit of good fortune there that it didn't pass that last test, but again, It was a lot of things it had to accomplish there successfully in order to kill the unit anyway. Okay, so what am I going to do now? I've got some flanks open here. This unit's flank is open. My Grotesque Champion has a charge on this unit, but nothing else because of the way it's angled. Only that unit. Susan is wavered. The half-breeds are going to charge in here because it turns out that the Grotesques don't actually have enough space to get round the half-breeds to get into combat as well. So they're going to have to just go and set up to fight this lot later. And the Grotesques can maybe fight those slaves, which is a risk because obviously if I kill them, there's death engines and stuff behind, which is scary, and a big horde. Immortal Guard could maybe take that flank, but what the Immortal Guard have actually spotted is that this death engine, this super death engine of doom, is actually visible to them. So they're going to flank charge it, along with the counter charge from the half-breeds. So they're going to hope to kill that with that. And then I'm going to use some fireball to try and kill some of the slaves from the caster there. Because if I fireball them off, then they don't explode on me, of course, which is good. So Susan is just staying where she is. Because why not? She's wavered, but it was a lucky waver, so she's unlikely to get put in that situation again, even with a double slave charge. Grotesques move up because they want to start charging them, because once we get to turn 3, I need to hold this area and score. And what's that? I do 9 wounds in combat with the Overmaster on Ancient Winged Half-Breed, and then roll a 10, and then roll a 12, and kill it in one go. That is correct. So the half-breeds just murder this guy, and he's toast. Some very good nerve rolls there, obviously. And then they can turn around to look at the other units over there. So yeah, this guy landing here did not work out for him. So the Grotesques kill 1 unit of slaves. Now I'm kind of just chewing through the unit strength here, because if I didn't kill them, let's go back and look. If I don't charge that unit, they can get out of the way, and the Grotesques are going to get double charged by these hard-hitting units anyway, I think. So I might as well take out some unit strength before I get hit. The other option would have been to hit them with the Immortal Guard, perhaps. But I wanted the Immortal Guard into this flank because I really want to kill these things. I don't want to get hit again by them. And I felt like that was too good an opportunity with the Immortal Guard. So kill the slaves, and then overrun. Kill the Super Death Engine of Doom, and then turn round with the Immortal Guard so they can't be seen by this one. And this guy is going to be in the front. And look at this. So the half-breeds are back to 2 wounds now. So they regenerated loads of them. Radiance of Life got 1 back as well. And then I fireballed those slaves and then healed them. And then they're down to 2. So very nice and very disheartening for an opponent when that happens, when a unit that you've almost killed gets nearly all its wounds back. It's happened to me many a time. The Grotesque Champion doesn't kill those slaves at the first attempt, and Bracky does not successfully kill those slaves either, but he does waver 1 unit, so he's going to be taking less attacks back next turn. And the fireball did only 3 damage, actually. I'm finding the fireball not that amazing, actually, with no piercing, even when it's 21 of them. So maybe it's just my bad luck. So this situation is still a bit of a mess, and I'm definitely not going to be holding this area anytime soon, but I'm okay with that for now. Over on this side, it's obviously looking healthier, and that was before I'd turned this unit, actually. Because we froze him in place so I could take a picture of the dice roll, and then I pivot them in a second. So, on to turn 3 for my opponent. The other death engine goes into the half-breeds, and if it doesn't kill them, it can fall into the same trap that the last one did and get flanked by the Immortal Guard again. And this guy decides that he can't physically get into the Immortal Guard while this guy's in there. So I think this unit, the slave unit's positioning is stopping him fitting in there, actually. That's messing him up, so he's just poised, waiting for next turn. Double charge on Susan. And the Grotesques get charged by these 3 units, as expected, and they get killed. And the half-breeds take a load of wounds again, and they get wavered. Which means they can countercharge because they have Fury. Susan takes some more wounds, but not wavered this time, so she's okay to continue fighting them next time. The Grotesques take 2 wounds from these slaves that have come out of their little hiding area. And so I'm going to be able to countercharge there. I'm going to be able to charge the half-breeds off the hill into these ones. And then Susan will be able to continue punching them in the face. These are the elite half-breeds on the hill, by the way. Which is why it's not surprising that they did a lot of damage to the big flyer. It was just the nerve roll that was high. So, turn 3 for me. Make those charges. Susan does kill off the unit, and this is important actually. I had to kill one of these units to score this area at the end of turn 3. So Susan did the job, the others couldn't finish off their units. So these did get wavered though, so they're not doing anything now. And what does my flyer do with his fireball? Fireballs off the death engine off the hill. So it does actually work, this fireball malarkey. And the Immortal Guard and the half-breeds killed off that death engine again, and I healed loads of wounds back again. And Radiance of Life and Regeneration, so they're almost at full health again now. The Grotesque Champion kills slaves and then does a bit of damage to himself. Bracky, I don't think he kills a unit, I think he just does a bit more damage. And yeah, we're slowly chewing through these rats, and I actually think I'm going to eventually win this fight, looking at it. There's mostly crummy slaves left and chariots, no death engines remain, so that's the main killing power. So, it's looking quite good at the moment actually. My concern would be if this horde of slaves kind of backs away, so I can't fight it with any of the good stuff, and then at the end of the game maybe holds this area, holds this objective at the end. I'd be concerned about that. So, at the end of round 3 we both score a point each, because we hold one area each. And on to turn 4 for the rats. Slaves into the Grotesque Champion. It's not in the flank, I've just got it turned that way because the model just pokes out way too far. And the charge here from this unit into the Immortal Guard, they do just about have space. This unit still can't get in there, but may well go after them. And Bracky is getting charged as well. So these guys get out the way a bit, and the individual charges my cavalry there. You can see all the damage Susan took, by the way, from the slaves exploding on her when they died. So the chariot goes into the half-breeds this time, and he did check first, because the Immortal Guard have done that thing twice, where they've flank charged a chariot-sized model that's gone in there. He did make sure that, because I've pivoted them now, that they can't do that again. So they're not going to be able to do that trick another time. But they are now in a position to flank this horde, who have just charged them if they don't die. Grotesque Champion takes some wounds. Bracky gets wavered, which is okay because he can countercharge still. And although he can only really countercharge this unit, probably. I suppose he could countercharge them actually, he'd just teleport down here. But they're the wounded ones, so I'd want to finish them off. The half-breeds get wavered again, so again they can countercharge and get their wounds back through various means. So yeah, if you don't bring Hex, this is what happens to you. You get fireballed, and then I just heal up the unit that's next to him repeatedly. So more damage on the Grotesques, but not much, and a few wounds done to them. From the king there. Is it not a king, is it? Slave, is it slave driver or overmaster? I can't remember now. So, on to my turn 4. So there's going to be a flank charge there. Well, I kill off all the slave units around here and then take damage from the explosions. Susan's flown away, so I'm just dealing with an individual here now. So I'm going to score this area for the next 2 turns, and then I can start leaving it heading to the middle. Over on this side, I get the flank charge, do some good damage there. Fireball again, which doesn't kill a unit this time, and then heal this unit back down to 1 wound. They don't kill the chariot immediately. Grotesque Champion doesn't finish off those slaves. Bracky does finish off those slaves and then overruns past them so that these 2 units now can't charge him, which is nice. However, it does leave open the possibility of this chariot getting into the flank of the Immortal Guard, but it doesn't have that many attacks. So we'll see how dangerous that is. So we both pick up another point at the end of that turn because my opponent is still holding this area with the slaves and I'm holding that area via being alive. So turn 5 for the rats. Yeah, so these guys move back a bit, allowing the chariot to get into the flank of the Immortal Guard and the horde in the front. The other chariot goes back into the half-breeds, and the Grotesque Champion does get wavered, but like most things in this army, he has Fury. So yeah, this army, almost everything has regeneration, almost everything has Fury or is just unwaverable, and almost everything has either Strider or Strider's boots or the ability to be a flyer, which means you can fly out of difficult terrain. So certain matchups, certain terrain setups, this can be a very powerful list, I think. So the Immortal Guard are dead, so not living up to their name. And the half-breeds don't take much damage. This guy actually does some wounds to the half-breeds, this little individual, so I'm going to try and countercharge him in a minute and murder him, but he is actually defense 6. So Susan has flown away because she is needed in this area, because if I lose this fight and then they start heading to the middle, that's bad news, because there's a lot of unit strength still here. So Susan is going to attack something shortly. And what am I going to do? Well, Susan's going to charge this chariot and try and deal with that. Bracky can hit something as well. The Grotesque Champion will hope to get through those slaves finally. And maybe I can fireball them into oblivion. Let's find out. So at the end of round 5... Yep, so I countercharge into this guy and waver him, which is good, and the Grotesques are working their way towards the centre. If he wasn't wavered, then he doesn't actually have enough movement to get in front and block the Grotesques off from reaching that anyway. I did actually measure this to make sure, because I was thinking that's something that he could try. But I don't think... He could probably get to about there, but then I just pivot and go that way and I'm still within 3, so it's not enough. But he's wavered anyway, so he's no longer a threat for that. So the Grotesques are going to have a free walk onto the objective in the centre for the final turn. And kill the chariot, waver the horde with fireball. Susan does damage to that chariot. The Grotesque Champion double ones the slaves, so they're not dead. And Bracky kills the other slaves, who then explode on him and he takes some more wounds. So we're getting through these rats quite rapidly now, apart from that double one. So at the end of that turn, 3 points each again. So turn 6 for the rats, and there's not really much they can do now, except pray that the game continues and they can kill off some stuff. So Susan takes a bit of damage, Grotesque Champion takes a bit of damage, but not much. Susan gets wavered, so she's not going to be able to fight. But the only danger here is that she died and then it overran, got into a safe position, and then there was another turn and it gets into the middle, which probably isn't going to be an issue anyway at the moment. So my turn 6, charge this character again, do some more wounds, put the Grotesques in the centre, so they've got their unit strength 3 on this objective, and kill all the slaves and the chariot. So everything else is dead, it's just that hero left over there now. And do we get a turn 7 so that I can try and table the filthy rats? We do. And he wavers the half-breeds, but obviously they've got fury, so then on my turn 7 they kill him. So, murdered everything on the table, very successful, 4-3 win. And I think against that list, that's the best I was going to hope for. I was never going to get 7-0, because chewing through all those rat slaves was always going to take the entire game, and you can't just do it willy-nilly and let yourself get death-engined to death. So obviously, this half-breed unit rode their luck a little bit to stay alive, but I did put all those hurdles in the way of the death engine to kill them in the first place that it successfully navigated, and then just fell at the last one. And then I was then able to repeatedly get the flank charge with the Immortal Guard on anything that attacked this unit. So that is something to note. If you're up against a unit that's quite long, and you've got one unit in front of the other, think about whether you've got it positioned such so that when they charge the unit behind, you can still see them with the unit in front. Something to think about. If it's a unit that's longer than your unit that's in front, often those flanks will be open. So that worked out very well that game, and I'm now on table 4, going into the final round of the Masters on 3 wins. So, can't ask for more than that. That's 3 times more wins than I got at the last Masters. And I'm up against the Twigletkin. So, what is in this Twilightkin list? And what is the scenario? So, the scenario for the final round is pillage. So there are going to be objectives all around, 7 of them. And that's not great for me because I don't have too many scoring units. So let's see what my opponent is bringing to the dance. Fleet Wardens. So a big horde of just decent infantry with phalanx and crushing strength 1 and elite. Now, one thing to know about this list, most of the stuff when it's hitting me is going to be elite and vicious. So there's a vicious aura somewhere in here, and most of them have elite. So many of the units will have both elite and vicious, which greatly increases their damage output. There is a regiment of mutants with 20 attacks and hit on 3s, so they're quite nasty. They have Strider. I don't think much else does. Thunderous Charge, which is a good thing to shut down, so that's the kind of thing Susan would normally look at and think, yeah, I'll eat them. But they do hit on 3s with elites, so they could get a lot of hits back on her. So they are a threat even if with the Thunderous. Then 2 Phantom units, so just fast chaff, better than Gargoyles. They're just a bit tougher than Gargoyles generally, but they're also a little bit more expensive. And then there are 2 hordes of Impalers, speed 5, but they do have Wild Charge D3. So all these units where you think, oh, they're not that fast, but actually Wild Charge D3, they are fast. Because they're going to potentially go up to 13, which is significant. Makes them faster than an Ogre, for instance, if they manage to get that off, and you have to factor that in when you're positioning, so they project a threat of 13 inches. And dash 17 as well on them, so you can't waver them. And big shield, so you'd think defense 4, but actually, if they position right, it's actually defense 6, dash 17. So they're as tough as lesser obsidian golems if you hit them in the front, which is amazing. And 3 Soul Flare cavalry units. So they're not really in fashion at the moment since they dropped to speed 8, but they're still a useful unit. The height 4 means that you can put them behind the rest of your army, and they can still charge things over the top, which is nice. And if you can get flanks with them, obviously, very tasty. They just don't control the whole table anymore now that they're not speed 10. A Mind Screech Planar Apparition, so heal and Mind Fog. A Navigator with Icy Breath to freeze enemy units. Crone with a Periscope to see over anything that's height 3, so it'll go up to height 4 to see over friendly units, or enemies for that matter. With Bane Chant and Weakness, which are going to be quite scary, especially since there's some defense 6 stuff in there. Weakness isn't going to be great. And then Weakness on another caster as well, so 2 lots of Weakness. And then finally a Void Lurker, which 10 attacks hits on 3, so it's just a decent fighting flyer with not that great defense. It's been upgraded so it's got higher nerve, and it is stealthy though. So it's expensive, and there is the setup. So we've got objectives here, 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 and there's one more, which is, I think, down here somewhere. So there's a box of 4 objectives there. Okay, so the reason this is a really interesting approach to this game is because of what's going on the top tables at the very moment this game is being set up. So, in the leaderboard, there are 9 players at this point who have a chance of getting on the podium, by my reckoning, and this table is certainly among them. We're table 4, so whoever wins on table 1 undoubtedly is just going to win the tournament. Table 2, whoever wins that is very likely to be on the podium. However, table 2, 3, 4 and 5 all have players on them who are on 3 wins. So, if someone gets a really big win on table 4 or 5, they could potentially break the tie after a number of wins and jump up onto the podium. So, if it was purely just trying to win the game, I would be thinking, I'm not going to be too aggressive here. I'm just going to, because I've got 2 objectives right on my side of the table, even 4 if you count those 2. So build a nice defensive line, invite the enemy forward where there's lots of difficult terrain, and then engage them on my terms. I'm not going to do that though, because if I only win, for example, 4-3, that's definitely not going to be enough to get on the podium. If you're going to get on the podium, you're going to have to score 6 or 7 on this mission, I would suggest. Which means that you're probably going to have to kill loads of the enemy's army, so they're not on the objectives at the end. So you can't really be too patient. So that is the situation. So if this was on the top table, and all you have to do is just secure a win, you would approach this very differently from the way I think both of us are going to approach this game, which is we want everything. We're going to be quite aggressive and try and murder the enemy's army and take all the objectives because we want that podium place. So that is our mindset in this game. So don't think that this is going to be a 100% tactical reflection of how you would normally approach a game with these two armies. So the enemy have of course got this big blob here, which has got the soul flayers behind the other units. I've got my flyers mostly behind there. And there's no hex though, so I'm going to be able to cast some spells potentially. And I've got a bit of a blob, and then out on this side I've got kind of the speed counter because there's some phantoms out there and the void lurker is on this side as well. So Susan, some gargoyles, quite a fast guy there, and I want to fire my rocket launcher at the phantoms immediately. Even though they're stealthy, the enemy also has a stealthy aura, which means that everything's going to be stealthy and spell warded. So my shooting might actually not be that effective during this game. And there's the big blob of enemy troops, and those are the fleet wardens. I think those are the ones that have phalanx. Is it phalanx? I haven't imagined that, have I? Yeah, phalanx. So phalanx on these guys. These ones are the ones with big shield, which going into the game I did forget they had big shield entirely. I didn't actually clock that looking at the list at all. I don't think I've played against the Twigletkin very much, so I'm not overly familiar with all their units. I know the mutants are scary, which are over there behind the phantoms. So what's my plan? Kill everything, pretty much. I've got the advantage in terms of Strider, so I want to be fighting over the terrain. I want to go first, really. So my opponent does have Wind Blast, which has to factor into your thinking in this scenario. However, my plan is to kill everything. So in that sense, I don't want to worry about Wind Blast. If Wind Blast is a factor at the end of the game, I'm not going to get enough points anyway, because that means the enemy army is still alive. So I'm not worried about that. I just want to go first because I want to get into the difficult terrain immediately so I can see through it. The enemy then charge me in the difficult terrain. They're going to be hindered, and if I charge out of it, I'm not going to be hindered. I've got the elite half-breeds there, so they're going to try and get to that hill potentially. There is a tiny gap between those as well, between those bits of terrain. Susan will go straight into the woods, so she's going to have a good staging area to then strike wherever she wants. And yeah, going first I think is important here, but I don't win the roll, and my opponent goes first. So we're going to have to rethink the strategy a bit there. The Void Lurker and the Phantoms move up on this side, behind the woods, so they don't have a great line of sight to anything, but also I can't see them without most of my stuff. I could charge the Phantoms with Susan, but then Susan might get killed. So I might actually have a different plan in mind for them. So there is a bit of shooting that's sent out from weakness, which does damage, which is supposed to be the Abyssal Dwarf gimmick. So not only have they stolen the ability to have Vicious all over your army, they also have elites. They're stealing the Elves gimmick with that. They're stealing the Vicious from the Abyssal Dwarves, and now they're stealing weakness that does damage from the Abyssal Dwarves as well. And they're stealing all the units from Night Stalkers. So Twilightkin, they're just a bunch of dirty pirates, aren't they? Stealing everyone else's good ideas. So weakness has been applied to the Grotesques and my caster there. Okay, so it's a big solid wall with flyers behind it that can see over everything in front. So it's quite scary, but let's do some shooting and get some wounds on the Phantoms. Bracky decides he's going to run out in front of this obstacle, out of the charge arc of the units on that side, and out of the charge arc of all the units here apart from these. So these units here could hit Bracky, but not many of them obviously. I decide, you know what, I'm not going to counter the Void Lurker at all. I'm going to play my own flying game. I'm going to ignore my War Machine, fly away from it, and flank the enemy instead, and see if they want to react to that. So I've got Gargoyles staring down the enemy flank now, and Susan, once they get out of the way. Because even if they got wavered, they could still move out of the way. Even if they got killed, obviously they'd be gone. So Susan has got a good view of the enemy. And the reason I've set them up exactly like this is because I don't want either of them to get wind blasted. So I've put Susan behind. So, will they take the bait and go after Bracky and then eat my charges? I resisted the temptation to put my Grotesques into the woods, because even with difficult terrain, I think these two units would kill them. And they would then be able to pivot and protect each other's flanks, I think. So I don't know whether that would have been a good idea to put them into the woods. Although, looking at it now, let's see, so if I went in there and then these two came in, killed me, they do a bit of pivoting, would they be able to successfully protect their flanks from all these units? Don't know, actually. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I could have tried to tempt them out, or maybe they would have just sent in one unit with a lot there as backup. I don't know whether they would have actually broken their lines for that anyway, they might have just held firm. So yeah, I don't know. Don't know whether they would have taken that on. Turn 2, and obviously Void Lurker going for the War Machine, which I'm cool with. And the Phantoms are getting behind my lines, so they're going to be fireballed in a minute. The other Phantoms go into my Grotesques. The Mutants actually get all the way to my Immortal Guard. And Bracky is charged just by the Fleet Wardens. So those are the charges. I'm okay with most of those. I'm not 100% sure this one's going to end well, because they do have a lot of attacks, but on average I don't think they kill them in one round, and they are inspired. But then, there is also Elite and Vicious to factor in, so they may well, on average, kill this unit. I haven't completely mathsed it out. The reason the Grotesque Champion is behind the woods is because he didn't want to be charged yet by the Void Lurker, even hindered. I would rather the Void Lurker attack my War Machine, because then it's really far away. So, the Gargoyles get weakened and take some wounds, but they don't get wavered, which is rare for them. And the War Machine does get killed and the Void Lurker turns around. So this guy's actually going to go into the woods next turn and then turn, because he's nimble, and look back so he's got the Void Lurker in the front again. So if it wants to charge me and start a fight in the woods, I'm down with that. But it's used up a turn killing my War Machine, which is mostly useless against this army with all the stealthy and the stealthy aura. And yeah, I'm fairly happy with it being out in this corner for the time being. Bracky gets wavered, which is a lot of damage. I wasn't expecting him to take that much damage, but he's fine anyway because he can Fury his way back into combat, although it would have been nice to hit a different unit instead. The Immortal Guard get killed. They take 13 damage. So yeah, I'm figuring out here that all these units with Elite and Vicious really just means, okay, I roll to hit, and none of them miss. And now I roll to wound, and none of them fail. But most of them anyway. So 13 damage and they die. So that's not nice. Phantoms obviously don't do much to the Grotesques. And I've got choices now. Do I charge my big flyer into those mutants, for instance? Or do I just use it to fireball the Phantoms? Do I throw out my Gargoyles in front of the mutants? Do I throw out my Gargoyles in front of anything else? Do I make a charge here? My half-breeds both have charges on these big shield units. So that is an option. I would have to stop this unit becoming hindered though with the Grotesques. They don't have a charge, they can't see through the woods. So I actually decide that I'm going to charge into each of these units now with my half-breeds. Because the way it's looking, the enemy behind my lines, I'm behind their lines, but Gargoyles aren't that scary. So I'm going to put the Gargoyles into the Planar Apparition to try and stop it casting. I'm going to put Susan into this horde with Bracky and hope that those two combined can do some good work there. I'm going to kill these Phantoms, obviously. And I kind of want to start fighting. I know it's still only going to be turn 2, but I'm concerned that if I stand off, the enemy will also stand off. And then the Grotesques will be stuck without a target. And the game will roll on, and worst case scenario, things start rolling in down this flank, and my flanking units probably aren't as scary as the enemies. So I kind of want to just start fighting now. So I'm going to charge them both in there. They're going into a big shield, but these guys have got boots of striding, these ones are elite, and I can stop them becoming hindered by putting the Grotesques on the edge of the woods there. So, turn 2. The Grotesque Champ moves into the woods and just turns round and says, "Come at me, Void Lurker." I fireball the Phantoms and kill the other Phantoms. Susan and Brecky have a really disappointing round though, and only do 7, or get this unit up to 7 wounds, which is sad. The elite, vicious, unhindered half-breeds only do 6 wounds in this combat. So, it's always tempting to do the maths and think how many should they be doing on average. They've got 16 attacks, and they are hitting on 3s, so you should be getting about 2/3 of those through, and that's before the elite is factored in. So, 2/3 of those through, so you'd be expecting around about, let's say 10 hits to get through. You would then expect maybe one of those misses to be 1, so turned back into a hit, so let's say 11. And then to wound, they would be on 4s with vicious. So half of those are going to wound immediately, so 5 to 6. And then probably get 1 more with the vicious. So, yeah, on average, it's not going to be that devastating, but you always feel like when you're throwing dice with elite and vicious attached to it, that barely any of them are going to fail. You just got that feeling, even if it's on 3s and 4s. And quite often that is the case. But here, it's not. It's painfully low average a number of wounds. The other unit does 6 as well. So, yeah, we've got them up there in wounds, though, so we made a start on them. Now, the Grotesques had to get in there to block off the woods to stop them sliding in. The one thing I totally forgot here, by the way, is because all these units are so congested and the heights of the units are different. So these Soul Flayers at the back, despite the models actually not particularly being taller than these guys, they are actually a greater height than the units in front of them. So that unit of Soul Flayers, if they have a line of sight to the Grotesques from up there, which I'm hoping is actually traced more like this, and they can't see them, my opponent will be hoping that it's traced more like that angle, and they can see the corner of them, then they actually have a flank charge on this unit of Grotesques, which I didn't think was going to be an issue, because I don't know if I forgot they were there, or forgot about the height, or just didn't think that it would even be close when they're drawing the arc. So we'll see if it actually is. I've put my gargoyles out here to do a bit of blockage there. Turn 3 for my opponent. So a double charge on these Grotesques from some of the Soul Flayers and the mutants. So I don't know. It's just these units seem to be so killy. Phantoms into my flyer to do a wound, to ground it. Void Lurker into the Grotesque champion, so he's got his head in his mouth there, which is a nice visual. And yes, apparently they do have the arc to hit this unit, and they get into the flank. So it was very, very close though. So we picked up, or my opponent picked up this unit, and we laid down a little marker there, just so we could actually fully check with completely flat, because it was extremely close, and they could just see the back of the unit from their position. So they do get that flank charge, which is very sad. Then a double charge here, because obviously they can fly over the top and then slide down, because they're flyers. And these ones into there. So because I was obviously hoping for something miraculous to murder both those units immediately on the first charge, but with that flank charge and with this double charge, suddenly it's looking not very good here. My gargoyles take a bit of shooting damage. My Grotesques get weakened as well. The gargoyles become wavered off 1 wound, as they usually do. Grotesque Champ takes 4 wounds, but he'll be fine there. And my Overmaster, my Ironcaster does actually take a wound, so is not going to be flying anywhere or casting spells. So Bracky is killed by this horde. So yeah, they're being really devastating. And that's sad times for Bracky. And so the unit there is dead. These guys get wavered, which is okay because they can counter. The Grotesques take some wounds as well, but they are able to survive, and these half-breeds get killed as well. So I've lost 2 of my hard-hitting units, but we have got damage onto some key enemy units and got all the flyers into the action, so they're no longer a threat. Now I say that, but I don't have much left to actually hit them with. It seems whatever these guys hit, they the hits stick, and I've not been able to say the same because I've only been able to get into the big shield stuff. So is my aggression at knowing I need 7 points to try and get to the podium going to come back and bite me here? Because I don't think I've even got enough units to score on all those objectives anymore. So turn 3 for me. Do some good damage there, but can't roll enough. Susan joins in as well, but can't get rid of them. So that's very sad, and she's hitting in the flank as well. So she's not suffering from big shield. And these grotesques here, they decide to go for the soul flayers on the hill, because that's the only unit where if I kill them I can then reposition and not get flanked and rear-charged by everything. But I don't manage to do enough to them, sadly, despite Strider. This guy does kill the phantoms and then turn to face the mutants, but it's looking very bad here, and it could be all over this turn. So lots of charges in on everything from all different directions. Weakness onto my grotesque champion, and then does some more damage, not enough to worry him. My caster is killed by the mutants at the first time of asking. And Susan is killed as well. And yeah, everything else is killed apart from him. So it's only the grotesque champion left. So everything is killed. So yeah, this has gone downhill fast. So grotesque champ does some good wounds there, but not going to be enough. Turn 5, then takes some more wounds. My turn 5, I just run away because I think, you know what, I'm eventually going to lose now because I've got other enemies looking at me, so I'll get behind the woods and just survive, last the game, and then maybe try and get a final turn charge in on something. Turn 6, my opponent moves everything in and shoots off the grotesque champion. He's only got 8 wounds on him, so that requires a 9 twice to get rid of him, and successfully kills him. So yeah, everything's dead. And that obviously did not go to plan. But really, was there that much of a plan in the first place? Or was it just bad positioning all round? Well, first of all, I clearly underestimated the hitting power of the Twigletkin. Which, is there a more devastating hit than some of those units going in with Elite and Vicious on them? Because I'm struggling to think of some. You can obviously take an army that already has Elite or Vicious and apply Elite and Vicious via a magic item as well, so you can get both on a unit. But to get it spread across multiple units in the army is very devastating, and it did seem like whenever my opponent was rolling the dice, the pile of dice kept getting bigger rather than smaller after the dice roll, which is actually true because he was rolling less dice than the number of attacks, because of just the handful of dice was too big, and was then like re-rolling some of the ones that missed as the extra hits. So it was actually getting bigger. So yeah, lots of attacks, lots of Elite, lots of Vicious, lots of murder, and I will know not to underestimate that in the Twigletkin, and play them in a less aggressive manner, I think. There was obviously leaving a flank open, which didn't actually really cost me anything, to be honest, because those grotesques would have been alive on their own around. They survived anyway, and then they did get to fight something before being hit. So that didn't actually affect anything, that not spotting the potential flank charge from a flying unit that was far away and just about in arc. I think I was very aggressive with Susan and the gargoyles instead of using them to counter, which is obviously something I could have done. Could have kept them back and played defensively, but as I said at the beginning, playing defensively was not going to put anyone on the podium in this game. Have to play aggressively, got to get a big win, got to get lots of victory points to get onto that podium, otherwise you're just going to be languishing in 7th or 8th place, which at the Masters looks impressive on paper, but you don't get a trophy and you don't actually get any rankings points for it either, because the Masters doesn't count towards next season's rankings. Unless you win, I think you automatically qualify for the next Masters in that case. But yeah, I felt like I had to be very aggressive to have any chance of scoring big in this game, and didn't pay enough attention to the enemy's army list to see things like Big Shield, which I don't think I was really aware of at the start, which I can obviously just read the opposing army list and was probably told about it as well. But be more familiar with all the armies is something. They're obviously new to Twiglets, so you haven't played against them very much, and you'll probably know that the way I learn about opposing armies is just playing against them. I don't tend to look too much at the new rules when things come out. I just wait until I'm facing it on the table and then learn what it does during the game, which obviously is not optimal for the Masters. So I feel like I can start formulating more plans against the Twiglets in future. I'm also looking at making some changes to my list going forward if I want to continue running this list. Obviously it works because I've got 3 wins at the Masters, which is obviously good and puts me in the top half of the table. So I think I finished 11th. So if I wanted to make a case that I was the 11th best Kings of War player in the UK, that would be my Exhibit A at the trial. I don't know whether it would actually be found in my favour because I didn't finish 11th in the overall rankings for the season, but it would be the one piece of evidence on my side if I wanted to make that case. So the list did well. The flyer with all the spells did okay when there was no Hex around, which was very rare. He spent most of the tournament hexed, so I don't think he is a good choice anymore. He's too big to hide from Hex, and he's got so many dice that when he does get hexed, he can't afford to cast spells. And all his spells are short range, so you can't move and spellcast when you've been hexed either. So he's probably going to come out going forward. What would I bring in instead? I have actually bought another Grotesque champion, because I think they're really good. I think having 2 of them would be even better. So I would like to have the option of taking a second one. Half-breed champions, there was an Abyssal Dwarf list at this event that also was doing well, and that actually finished really high up, and had 3 half-breed champions and Bracky, and another mounted character, which was an orc as well, which was the orc formation that you can get in the slave orcs. You get it in the Abyssal Dwarf army. So 5 individual cavalry running around, and that obviously did really well at this event. So more of those. I've got a couple of half-breeds I can paint up. I'm actually looking at attaching a different head to one of them and using that as Bracky in future, so he stands out from all the rest. So other than that, to keep running the fast Abyssal Dwarf list, I think that's the way to go. Drop the big caster, add in more small units, Grotesque champion, half-breed champions. Does Susan deserve to stay in the list? Occasionally she does really well, kills units on her own, holds up things like knights. She's a good hunter for those units, but she's not reliable. She doesn't have vicious, and she doesn't have fury. One of the few things in the list that doesn't have it. So she does get wavered, and then can't fight. And she does occasionally fail to hit with some of her attacks and fail to wound, and then doesn't have vicious. So she's just not reliable. She's just a very good utility. So if she was dropping out and the big flyer, that means all my speed 10, apart from the gargoyles, is gone. Is that a big deal? Is speed 10 just a crutch? Is it something you actually need anyway? I don't know. Obviously, people win big games without speed 10, but usually have some. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to make some more lists. I don't want to buy a ton more models and make a totally different list. I can also try running the golems again with some of the changes to the other units that have been made to complement them and give them a go. And then obviously I've got my 5 other Kings of War armies that haven't had a look in recently, apart from the Night Stalkers. I've had a bit of action. But I was focusing more on Abyssal Dwarves at the end of the season because I was gunning for the top Abyssal Dwarf player, which is what got me qualified for Masters in the first place. So Abyssal Dwarves obviously #1 priority at the moment. This has been a long video, 2 hours 43 minutes. Yeah, Masters, it's a very intense event. Yeah, so at Masters you expect, obviously with all the top, most competitive players, if there's ever going to be an event where you've got people who are angry or grumpy or diving across the table to fight their opponent, you would think it would probably be at Masters. But I didn't see any fights breaking out. There were at least 2 people that seemed particularly grumpy. There was one person actually who was really grumpy at the start of round 1 and seemed like to have given up. He was on a nearby table and I overheard, just sounded like he'd already given up on the game before the game had even started, just based on the first turn roll, I think. So you don't want to have that attitude, surely. That's very defeatist. But in general, Kings of War community is one where you don't tend to get a lot of angry people stomping around. Quite a few years ago there was one, there were 2 players who were playing against each other, and people thought, those 2 are like very, very competitive and definitely don't like when things go against them. But no punches were thrown, I can confirm. So, never seen anything too wild in a War Games event. No one's been put through a window yet. And if it was ever going to happen, it would surely be the Masters, where you have the most competitive crowd, and I still haven't seen it. So I think Wargamers in general, just a nice bunch of people. And this was held at the Mantic HQ, so that's why I picked up the Grotesque Champion while I was there, because obviously they've got all the Mantic stuff on sale. And yes, it was a good tournament. I liked the scoring system. I've been known to like scoring systems that mostly favour winning over the amount of kills you get, so I was glad to see that at the Masters. I think winning the game is the ultimate test of being a good general, I think. Killing lots of stuff and losing the game, I don't think should be weighted highly at all. I know in some scoring systems, if you kill loads of stuff and score victory points, even if you don't win the games, you end up with loads of points, and if you win very narrowly and don't kill much, then you don't get many points at all. And I'm not really a fan of that system, but I don't mind the variety, don't mind seeing it occasionally. I just generally prefer winning the game being the ultimate goal, and then everything else is secondary. So I don't really like the old 20-0 system that you see in you've seen at events over the years in various different systems. Because the margin of victory, I think, makes too big of a difference in the 20-0 system. I think it increases or decreases your score too much. So I like the win to be just solid. Here's a number of points for winning. That's it. That's your main scoring, and then a small amount of bonuses for killing and victory points on top of it. That's what I like. Okay, so someone did ask earlier about the old world, so I'll tell you a bit about that now then. If anyone's got any questions about any of these games or Masters, drop them in now, and I'll get back to them in a second. So old world, obviously, Warhammer's back, and it's a rank and flank game by a much larger company than Mantic, so the obvious thought is, are people going to migrate from Kings of War back to Warhammer, potentially, because that's where most of them probably came from? And the answer is, I doubt it. People are going to dabble in it, probably, but people who've played Kings of War heavily, it's a very clean system compared to Warhammer. So I don't think someone who plays Kings of War competitively would get the same satisfaction from the game system playing Old World competitively, probably, because it's just not as smooth and clean as Kings of War. And you've still got potential for things like time wasting in Warhammer, because you are rolling dice on your opponent's turn, you're fighting on your opponent's turn sometimes, you're making armor saves, so there are ways to delay the game if you were using chess clocks, for instance. And tapping the chess clock over multiple times during the turn, say, okay, now make your armor saves, tapping the clock. I don't think that's feasible, particularly. So I think for a nice, clean tournament system, I think Kings of War is going to reign supreme, and it's still probably my favourite rule set of a game. But the one thing that pulls me to a game isn't just the rule set, it's generally the miniature line. So that's why I don't really play any, people use the term miniatures agnostic games, where it's just a rule set and you can use what miniatures you like. Those don't tend to grab me at all, because I need the miniatures. That's what I'm in it for most of all. I'm an army collector. I collect armies, paint armies, and then I play games with them. And then if certain units do well, I'll probably buy more of those units. But I'm unlikely to get to the point where I can spam units, because I like to have one of everything at the start, generally. I've never looked at the rules and thought, yes, that would make an excellent list, I'm going to go out and buy 10 of those and paint them up in super fast time and then take them to a tournament. That's just not something I'd do. I wouldn't want a huge entire army that just becomes invalid because a book changes, and I like variety in my lists anyway. The most spammy any of my armies have ever got was maybe my Goblins, where I've got 4 troll hordes, but even that doesn't even add up to half of your army. So yeah, the miniature line comes first, and Warhammer miniatures, I'll probably do a full video on this at some point actually, but I'll give you, people who've stuck through this Masters video all the way to the end, I'll give you a little taste of it. So, when I was but a wee lad at school reading White Dwarf magazine, like a nerd, all those miniatures in there, I wouldn't be able to afford most of those as a child, but because I can pretty much do what I want with my small amount of disposable income now. I don't have any other expensive hobbies outside of this. All my disposable cash goes on miniatures and attending tournaments. That's literally 100% of where all my money goes on non-essentials. So yeah, I've got a strict hobby budget, which I do stick to though. So if I want to spend more, I do have to sell things. So I've been selling some of my stuff that I'm definitely not going to get to ever on eBay and on Facebook Marketplace as well. So that's allowed me to jump into the old world and pick up the Bretonnian army and some of the new units. And I'm not going to fall into the trap of assembling the whole army though, because that's the fun bit for me. I really like assembling. That's maybe the most fun part. And then finishing painting is really fun as well, but the slog of going through painting them all is not as fun as just building them and then completing them and having the army and looking at it and taking pictures. That's the bit I like the most. So I'm just going to assemble one unit at a time, try and get it painted, and then move on to the next one. That also means that if you've not assembled models, they're much more valuable as well. If you want to sell them and you decide you're not going to pursue the army and you're just going to get rid of them. So they're going to be worth a lot more if they're still in box or still on the sprue. So I would definitely recommend that. Don't assemble a whole army. Unless you're the kind of person who likes playing with unpainted armies, and that's the way that your local group do it. I personally wouldn't put an unpainted model on the table, because that's not really what the hobby is to me. The hobby is creating an army that's fully painted, and then after that you then decide what to do with it. It's not a hobby of, I'm going to attend tournaments, therefore I'm going to create an army for that. The army comes first, and then playing it on the table is second, generally. Even though I've been to a billion tournaments, that's still where I come at it first. So a lot of these miniatures that I saw in White Dwarf back in the day, there's a lot of nostalgia attached to them, and I can now afford to buy some of them, but they weren't available, so I wasn't going to pay eBay prices for all of them because I would go bankrupt in a week. And some of them are coming back comparable to eBay prices, but obviously in better condition because they're brand new. And then some of them are definitely below what you would have been paying on eBay back in the day, especially the new Old World Army boxes, which are much better value than the individual units, definitely. So there's a lot of units that I'm looking out for coming back. I really like some of the old Warriors of Chaos. The old Chaos Warriors in the 90s, especially the heroes, the named heroes, I really liked all of those. I owned most of them, so very sad I got rid of those back in the day. And I don't know if they're going to bring back those models, because they've moved the timeline a bit, so I don't know if those named heroes are still relevant enough for them to bring back the model. They are bringing back the Metal Marauder Giant, which is hilarious, which is probably the most iconic giant of all time, even though it looks tiny now next to everyone's massive giants that have come out since then. So it's just a really fun miniature range and a very immersive world that I've obviously played a lot of PC games as well for Warhammer way back in the 90s. Dark Omen, one of my favourite PC games. I might stream playing that at some point actually on YouTube. I think that would be fun. If I can get it working on this new PC. That is one of my favourite games. And I've played Vermintide and Total War Warhammer, all three of them. And yeah, it's just a game that, even if I know it has flaws, generally, all the editions of Warhammer had flaws, it's still something that I'm going to play when it exists. It's not going to boot out Kings of War, because Kings of War is definitely embedded. I've got 5 or 6 armies in my cabinet, so I'm still going to be attending as many Kings of War events as are taking place within striking distance of me. I'm still going to be playing Age of Sigmar tournaments. I'm now going to be playing Old World tournaments. I'm going to be playing Dead Zone tournaments. I'm going to be jumping on Epic Warpath when that Kickstarter hits from Mantic in a few days. Or a few weeks. I'm not sure exactly when the date is that it starts. But hopefully there'll be tournaments for that I can play. I'm going to be playing Walking Dead events as well. Mantic's Walking Dead. That's back. And I'm going to be running tournaments for some of these systems as well. I've already been running Dead Zone events, so I'm going to also try and run some Kings of War and The Walking Dead as well. The other Mantic systems that I play. And yeah, it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be very, very busy on this channel. In fact, I'll have a look at my little tournament calendar and tell you what's coming up over the next few months. So, in my little notebook here with all my events, So in February, I have got there's an Age of Sigmar tournament, and then there is the Walking Dead relaunch day at Mantic, which is going to be exciting. Then there's another Age of Sigmar tournament. Then, I think there is a bit of a gap in the calendar, so I'm looking to fill that actually, but by the time we get to April, there are 2 Kings of War events at the same weekend, one on the Saturday, one on the Sunday, and then around that there are 2 Old World tournaments as well that I've signed up for, so that's going to be a busy month. And then there are 2 more Kings of War events, kind of mid-year and late-year as well. So I do need to fill up the calendar with more events. So if you know of any tournaments coming up, there is one Dead Zone event I'm looking at actually that I think I'm available for, so I should probably get a ticket for that one. I think that's in March, so I'm keeping my eye on that. So if you know of any Kings of War events that are taking place anywhere within striking distance of, preferably striking distance of Nottingham, but I do have family in Manchester as well, so any events up there, I can generally try and get to those. So let me know if you know of any, and I'll be checking all the various tournament calendars as well, trying to fill in my calendar, as long as it falls within my budget, of course. And obviously, if you think this is the best channel in the world, and you want me to attend 1 billion tournaments and report on all of them, then you should be pledging all your life savings via the Patreon, which is linked in the description, or the PayPal down there as well. Just send me all your money and I'll go to all the tournaments in the world with 1 billion different armies for 1 billion different game systems. Maggers says, the lore and nostalgia is drawing me back to the old world. It's a casual game, I think it'll scratch the itch that I can't get from Kings of War outside of tournaments. Yes, I think that's fair. You can play multiple game systems for different reasons. You don't need to be loyal as such to one system or one company. I'm happy to play all kinds of different games at tournaments and casually. I almost said for fun, but then tournaments are actually fun. Nearly all my games are at tournaments. I don't play a lot of practice games. So I'm generally surprised when I turn up to an event and then do quite well, or even get in the podium places with an army that I didn't practice with. I tend to kind of figure out my army by game 2, but I'm generally familiar with all my units anyway. I don't often go to an event with an army I've never played before. In fact, the only time I did, with an army that I'd literally never used even in one game, I ended up finishing last, and that was the first time I took League of Rordia to a Kings of War tournament. And I'd never played a game with them before, and I didn't have any volley guns, which were the hotness at that time. So I didn't have any of them ready yet, but I still took the army. But I did win Best Painted as well, so it was worth it. Right, don't forget to check out my Facebook group. Don't forget to follow on Twitter. There's a Discord server as well in there. All kinds of cool stuff in the video description that you should be checking out. And liking the video and subscribing if you haven't done any of those things, obviously. And I'm very satisfied with that Masters performance. 3 wins out of 5. I would have taken that any day. The 2 games I lost, actually. The first one I lost was against the player that finished first in the end. And the final game, the player that I lost to in that game ended up finishing 3rd. So I don't have to be too ashamed of losing to those 2. And yeah, very pleased with how my army performed for the most part. I think the list can be tweaked and optimised a bit, but I think it did well. It was suitably killy. Going into the last round, I was right up there with the top players in terms of kill points. So yeah, it was going well until that last game. But in general, pleased with the army, pleased with the list, pleased with how I used it for the most part, until I kind of changed my strategy going into the last game because of the tournament leaderboard situation, and that kind of backfired a bit, as you saw. Right, time to wrap this one up. Nearly 3 hours of non-stop Kings of War analysis action after 2 solid games of Kings of War competitive tournament gaming. You can't ask for more than that. Okay, all that remains to be said is... In fact, you know what? I just thought there's another slide here. There we go. There's the medal from qualifying for the Masters. And there's also a little Goblin trophy that I got from my opponent in Game 1. So that's a little trophy for annihilating John's army there. Very kind. And that actually is the end now. So, all that remains to be said is, good night out there. Whatever you are.